this standards of practice na tayo. Ito yung SPP documents na tinatawag. Okay? The standards of practice, there are a set of documents, no, SPP 201 onwards. Ang purpose nila is, parang the simplest way I can say it is, each document talks about a particular service and talks about how to render that service, the standards for rendering that service. Think of it that way. One SPP document, one service. So let's begin. Okay, so intro muna before we start with SPP document 201. So, intro ng standards of practice. First, it talks about the standards for selection, the methods of selecting an architect. How are architects selected? How do clients select architects? So nakalagay sa standards natin, there are three methods of selection. We have the direct selection method, and the comparative selection method, and the design competition method. So there are three methods. Okay, when is each method appropriate? So the first method, direct selection, is literally when a client directly selects an architect. Okay, this is applicable or para appropriate for relatively smaller projects. No, the client will select an architect directly based on the reputation of the architect, based on the recommendations of a personal or business acquaintance or a friend, based on the recommendations of former clients of the architect, or based on the recommendation even of another architect. So those are the basis, basis ng kliyente for making that direct selection. Again, appropriate ito kapag medyo maliit lang yung project. Comparative selection naman is parang bidding. That's the closest analogy I can make it, bidding. Parang nagpapabid ka, but not for a contractor, but for an architect. So this is typically conducted by committees that represent big clients, institutions, corporations, public agencies. Normally, for clients like this kasi, the selection process must be a lot more transparent. Parang may accountability requirement, dapat medyo transparent yung proseso para siguradong walang lagay, walang under-the-table dealings, the best deal, the best architect is being hired. No? So, ito yung mas transparent man ng proseso, parang bidding siya. So, according to our standards, ganito yung process ng comparative selection. The first step is the invitation step. This is the step where the client invites architects to participate in the selection process. So, magsasend out ng invitation si client, kasama sa invitation yung terms of reference, and invited architects will say yes or no depending on whether they're interested or not. Now, after the invitation, the architects who say yes, who confirm interest, move on to the pre-qualification step. In this step, the architects will submit information regarding their qualification and expertise. Okay, so basically, magsasabit sila ng documents explaining why they're qualified, what projects they've done before, etc., etc., etc. So that's the pre-qualification phase. The next phase is the interview phase. In this phase, the bidding architects, I'll just call them bidding architects, mga architect na nagbibid pa, they're trying to win the bidding. They will explain their methodology in translating down the plan and design requirements of the project. Ipapaliwanag nila paano nila i-design yung project. Okay? Take note that the important thing here is they're not designing it yet. They're not showing the design yet. Hindi pa nga sila nag-design it. They're just explaining how they're going to design it if it's awarded to them. That is an important distinction. That's what separates this from, say, design competitions. The next method. So design competition is you design before you get hired. Okay? Dito, you only design when you get hired. So during this phase, interview pa lang, wala pa, hindi ka pa hired yun. Okay, so what do you do? Do you design? Do you show them what you're going to design so that you get hired? No, you don't show them the design, you don't design anything really. You just explain how you're going to design this. Ano yung methodology mo? Okay? So anyway, after the interview phase, comes the verification phase. Verification is parang background checking. The selection committee will visit buildings designed by the architects, titignan maganda ba yung design, maayos ba yung trabaho, We'll talk to former clients and even financial institutions to check yung financial capability ng firm to undertake the job. So parang background checking and verification. After the verification, ready na sila to score and to rank, evaluation and ranking. So in this step, the selection committee will evaluate the entries and will make recommendations. Irarank yan, isi-score yan, may criteria for scoring. The highest scorer will be recommended to be hired. Okay? And the final step is negotiation. So most likely, yung top recommendation ng i-endorse for negotiation, pag-uusapan yung fee, tatry pa siguro humingi ng discount kung kaya, or baka i-refine ng kaunti yung scope. Kung mag-work, then hired siya. Kung hindi, maybe they will move on to the second place, no? the rank number 2 sa ranking. So, yun yung comparative selection. Again, it's a very lengthy process, but this is often the case for larger corporations. Kunyari nga, ang kliyente mo is a big corporation or something, government, dapat mas transparent yung proseso, and this is obviously a much more transparent process than, say, direct selection. Okay? Now, the third and the last option, method of selection, is design competitions. Okay? This is only applicable to civic projects or monumental projects. Okay? We'll talk about design competitions later sa SPP 208 kasi may competition code. No? May standards tayo for that. So, I won't really explain solutions to a problem and somebody will win. Okay? And this is the only method where the architect designs first before getting hired. And there's a good chance actually, na nag-design ka and you won't get hired kasi only one will win. Okay? So, anong advantage ng method na to? The advantage is for the client, mas marami siyang options. And another advantage is the client is choosing a design, not just a designer. Okay, that's an important, again, concept. In the comparative selection method, the client is not choosing a design, the client is choosing a designer. In design competition, the client is choosing not just a designer, but also a design. So that's obviously an advantage for the client. Kasi medyo alam ni client where it's headed. Anong disadvantage? The disadvantage is this method, design competitions, they can be very expensive and time-consuming, both on the part of the client and the architect. And also, some good architects are discouraged from joining because of the time and effort required. Okay, I watched a documentary, I think it was Norman Foster who said it. He hates design competitions now because they're a massive waste of good ideas. Okay, like parang, no matter how many excellent ideas are submitted, only one will win. So parang there's a guarantee that a lot of the good ideas will be put to waste, will not win. So parang nakaka-turn off din daw sometimes the amount of good work that is just wasted through design competitions. But anyway, yeah, it could discourage qualified firms from joining because of the time and effort required. And another disadvantage is this could be used as a guise to obtain free designs. Pwedeng yung mga masasamang tao, pwede na lang gamitin yung design competition to get many good designs for free. Okay? So it could be used in that way, misused in that way. That's why we have a competition code. Pero we'll talk about that later. Pero the competition code is designed to prevent yung mga ganitong pangyayari. Okay? Yun yung parang nasasamantala yung mga sumali, nananakawan sila ng designs, etc. Anyway, we're not going to start. So that's the preliminary, that's the parang Annex A yung tawag dun. That's the first part. We're now about to start with the SPP documents proper. Again, these are a set of, think of them as parang 9 documents, each document explaining one particular type of service and how to render that service. If you're wondering, bakit ang dami? Ba't 9? Well, not all of those are services actually. Like competition, hindi naman yung services. Pero ang idea kasi here is as architects, we render a multitude of services. Now, we don't just render one service. Kasi many people have this misconception that architects only do one thing, and that's they design buildings. This is not true. No, we don't just design buildings. Yes, we do that, but we do so much more than that. No, You could get an architect not for the design of buildings, but you could get an architect for construction management, for building management. You could get an architect for acoustic design. You could get an architect for site selection, feasibility studies. You could hire an architect for so many things. Okay? And that's why we have many SPP documents, because with so many services that are on offer, um, we have to have standards for each one. Okay? And that's what the SPP documents are. Each SPP document lays down the standards for each particular type of service. Okay? Yung, yung typical, yung stereotypical service that we design houses, that's the parang, when you ask a layman, what does an architect do? That's the common answer. Nagde-design ng bahay, arkitekto. That is just one service of many services. In fact, that's going to be covered by SPP document 202. Okay, but anyway, we'll start with SPP document 201. This is not about designing buildings. This service is called pre-design services. Services that may be needed by some clients before the design phase. Okay, so SPP document 201. Let's begin. Okay, introduction muna. Okay, so many of the SPP documents begin with a little bit of context. No, parang gina-justify, ba't ba kailangan pa ng ganitong service? Parang ganun yung first part usually. So, this is SPP document 201, pre-design services. Nakalagay dito, the basic services provided by architects have remained relatively unchanged over the years. No, most of it is the same now. Since I mean from many years ago to now, parang mostly the same. No, we design buildings and that's it. However, architects must expand their services in response to the following. No, one, clients are more demanding now. Two, there are new standards of practice. Three, there's new technologies, and four, there's new laws that have been enacted. So, as a result, clients need more services than just building design. Okay, and one of those parang additional services is the idea pre-design services. Now, the idea of pre-design services. Before I read this, I'll just put it in my own words. Now, what pre-design services are. Pre-design services are optional services. I want to emphasize the word optional. Kasi some students make the mistake of thinking na required ito. Hindi ito required. Okay? These are just services that some clients may need for some projects. Not all projects are going to require this, and not all clients are going to require this. But some of them will. And for those that need these services, what we're saying is they can get an architect to do it. Okay? We're talking about things like feasibility study and site selection study and mga ganyan, mga programming. These are things that some clients may need before the design phase. The idea is most of these, kaya nga pre-design, most of these are things that the client needs before ipa-design yung building. Like for example, merong kliyente, meron siyang lote, hindi niya alam kung anong ipapatayo. Okay? Like meron na siyang property in the province, hindi siya sure. Lagyan ko ba ng mall, lagyan ko ba ng hospital, or gawin ko bang subdivision, ano kaya magandang gawin dyan? Doon sa lupa namin sa ganun. O for a client like that, hindi alam kung anong dapat gawin, pwede kumuha ng someone to analyze the potentials of the site. Ang sinasabi lang natin is, pwedeng architect ang kunin for that. Okay, pwede rin, another client naman. Meron na siyang gustong gawin. Like, the client knows ano yung gusto niya ipatayo, pero hindi siya sure kung maganda ba yung idea, hindi siya sure kung good idea ba na magtayo pa ng mall. A feasibility study may be needed. And an architect can do that. Some architects can do that. So that's the idea behind this. So are these required? Do all clients need this? No. Okay, not all clients need this. Some clients know what they want and they just want someone to design the building now. And they just need someone to design the building. For clients like that, render the regular design service that's covered by SPP 202. But for some clients who have these needs before design, we can offer them the pre-design services. Okay, so anyway, when we say pre-design services, plural, are there many? Yes, there are many. There are 12 actually. Okay, let's look at the list now. Anyway, basahin ko pala yung slide muna, I forgot. may justification. Why would you need to hire an architect at this stage? Napakaaga pa eh. Kasi wala ka pang ipapadesign na building eh. Diba? Hindi mo pa nga alam ano papadesign mo eh. Ba't ka mag-hire ka na ng architect? Sabi ng SPP natin, involving the architect in the earliest stages of the project would be advantageous to the client because as architects, we can provide the client with project analysis, parameters, etc. We have a lot of inputs and we can help them make better decisions because we're trained to think that way. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, so even before the design phase, it might be a good idea to hire an architect already. Okay? For what services? Again, pre-design services, we have 12 types. Okay? Not all of these are required. Not everyone's going to need this. Some clients might never need any of this. But for those who need services like this, what we're saying is, we can do this for you. Okay? You can hire an architect for something like this. Okay? Let's begin our list of 12 pre-design services, starting with the most obvious. The first pre-design service is consultation. Okay? Ano meron sa consultation? What kind of service is this? This is when a client calls upon you to give oral or written advice, to give direction, to attend a conference, to make evaluations and appraisals regarding a contemplated project. You give valuable input, okay, to the client to help the client decide whether the project should be pursued or not. Okay, so basically, literally consultation. So, binabayaran ka para lang makapag-consult siya with you. Okay, that is a pre-design service. Assuming it's happening pre-design. Next, the second pre-design service is what we call the pre-feasibility study. Okay, these are, pre-feasibility study. Iba pa yung feasibility study. Okay, ito is pre-feasibility study. These are preliminary studies involving the procurement, analysis, and use of secondary information gathered for the project to aid the client in early decision making. The pre-feasibility study represents your initial assessment of the project's soundness and will allow the client to explore his options, whether to pursue the idea or not. So this is your initial assessment of, is this a good idea or not? Will this business probably succeed or not? How do you do the study? Well, marami kang gagawin, pero for me, the keyword is secondary data or secondary information. Pag sinabing secondary information, this is information na hindi ikaw personally nag-gather. No? Like parang meron kang survey na nakita and may resulting survey. Hindi ikaw yung nagpa-survey, pero may survey kang nakita and may data from the survey. Okay? Kasi kung ikaw yung nagpa-survey, ano yun? Primary information yun, primary data yun. Okay? So pre-feasibility study, you don't need to gather primary data. Secondary data is fine. And this represents that, again, this study represents your initial assessment of the project's soundness. Okay? Now, the third pre-design service is the feasibility study service. So feasibility study is the detailed analysis of the project based on the pre-feasibility studies. Ang goal ng feasibility study is to determine the viability of the development. So this is much more detailed, much more technical, and much more parang sure. It will set the project against present trends and future trends. The feasibility study must forecast how the project will perform over time, gather ang return of investment, etc. And a study like this requires primary data gathering. Why am I highlighting these words? Parang, sir, I get that they're different, but these words, parang they're not that important. Why highlight them? Sometimes kasi, pag tinanong ka ng mga ganito sa exam, the question is oftentimes phrased in this way. Ikikwento sa iyo ano yung ginawa ng arkitekto, and itatanungin ka, anong service yung render niya? Okay? Sometimes the services can sound really similar, and I think keywords are going to be important. You should like parang pick out certain keywords which when you see, tells you right away, primary data visibility. As secondary data, sure ako pre-visibility. Kasi primary data yung isa. So kung secondary data, sure ako pre-visibility. So you want to be paying attention to certain keywords, especially for things that kind of sound similar that you could mistake for the other. Okay? So it's easy to tell them apart. Okay, just in case na sa exam. Anyway, so that's the feasibility study. There are 9 more pre-design services. The next one is called site selection and analysis. From the name, it's obvious what you're going to be hired for. You're going to be hired to help select a site. So here, ang gagawin mo is, tulungan si client maghanap ng site. You formulate site criteria, you assist the client in evaluating potential sites, you analyze you prepare an analysis to determine the most appropriate site for a project. So merong project, naghanap kayo ng site for the project. Tinutulungan mo siya. This is the service. Next, site utilization and land use studies. Here, merong note si client, pero hindi siya sure anong gagawin sa note. No? So pwede kang i-hire for the preparation of the site utilization study. Basically, you do an analysis of the site to identify the potentials of the site. Your analysis should cover the context of the site, the environment, the development controls. Ang goal is to arrive at the best possible use for the property. Now, you're being hired to give advice. Anong magandang gawin? Anong magandang itayo doon sa property niya? Number 6, architectural research. Honestly, it's research. It's exactly what you think it is. Here you conduct primary, secondary research. You're being hired to do research. Okay? It is a pre-design service. Some clients need that. Some clients need that. Next, architectural programming. Bago mo pa-design, ipagawa mo na ng program. Possible. So some clients would want to do this. This architectural programming is an analytical problem-seeking process that leads to the statement of the horizontal and vertical requirements for the project, not for the solution. So the program will incorporate a space program with a characterization of the spaces like ambience, cost range, etc. So that's the architectural program. For clients na gusto mo na magpagawa ng program bago mo pa-design, pwede kumuha ng architect, not for the design, but just to do the architectural program. Okay? Sometimes this could be useful for, kunyari magpapabid kayo, kailangan nyo ng TOR, terms of reference. Although, ibang service kasi yung TOR, lalabas yun later. Pero let's just go to number 8, space planning. Okay? Space planning is a service where the architect is hired to determine the adequate size, the appropriate configuration for a proposed project, considering the use, allocation, and interface of spaces for given activities. Okay? Space planning is done mainly through primary data gathering now, like interviews, consultations, focus group discussions, space planning surveys, etc. Now, I wouldn't call it a problem, but a possible issue with space planning is there's a service, and the next one sounds really similar, space management studies. Okay? Anong difference ng space management studies and space planning or space planning study? Space management studies are kind of more related to the organizational structure of the client. Here, you perform an analysis of the space requirements of the project based on how the organization is structured. Ano yung setup ng corporation? Ilang departments, ilang VPs, ilang staff, ilang ganyan-ganyan. So, parang using how the organization is designed or structured, you're going to analyze or provide analysis of the requirements. So in your analysis, you have to pinpoint linkages, how the spaces are supposed to interact, considering how the organization works. Gagawa ka ng space program that later will be used as the basis for the architectural design. Kung tumuloy man sa architectural design. Next service is value management. Value management. Okay, so this technique, value management, is applied in the cost management process to minimize the negative effects of many cost reduction programs. Take note that the term that's often used in the real world is value engineering, VE, value engineering. But in our standards, our preferred, well, not preferred, the term that was used in the standards is value management. I don't know if they were trying to purposely avoid saying the word engineering. Hindi ko alam if that was the reason, but value management is an okay phrase din naman. It kind of sounds the same. Again, ang goal nito is to minimize the negative effect of cost reduction. When you perform cost reduction and bawas ng budget, magkakaroon ng downgrades somewhere, right? Things have to change in order to reduce cost. And these changes usually have a negative effect. Mas pangit, hindi same yung performance, mas maliit, mga ganyan. Those are negative effects, right? The goal of value management is to minimize those negative effects. Meaning, reduce tayo ng cost, pero minimal, or kung kaya, walang negative effects dapat. Okay? The goal of value management, then, is to achieve an unimpaired program at the minimum cost. Okay? Meaning, na hitting same set of requirements, it performs the same, but it costs less. A plan, a design, or a system that has been successfully value managed must satisfy the same criteria as more expensive options. It's cheaper, but it works the same. That's the basic idea. Okay? Next, design brief preparation. Okay, naalala nyo kanina when we were talking about comparative selection. Di ba sabi natin, three methods of selection: direct selection, comparative selection, and design competition. Right? So comparative selection, maghihingi ka ng bids from architects. No, kunyari, meron kang 5 architects, nag-bid sila, they want to win this project. Right? In order for them to submit a proposal, they need to understand muna what you're going to ask them to design. How will they understand that? Hey, kwento pala sa kanya, papadesign kasi kami ng airport, ganito karaming terminals, blah, blah, blah. No, normally there's a document that you give to them that they will read in order to understand exactly what they're dealing with, in order to understand exactly what they're going to be designing. Okay? And after they have read that document, they should be ready now to think about it and figure out how much yung tamang isingil for a project like that. That document is called the Terms of Reference or the Design Brief. Okay? The Design Brief. At tanong, sino gagawa ng Design Brief or ng Terms of Reference? Ang sinasabi lang natin is, an architect could be hired for this job. Okay? Pwede naman kung kaya ni client, hindi siya gumawa. Kung ibang pwede gumawa, hindi ba gumawa? Pero kung gusto niya architect, pwede ng architect. In fact, it might be a good idea to get an architect for this. Kasi ang purpose ng design brief is mabasa ng architect, potential designer, maintindihan kung ano yung gagawin. And who better to explain what the design job is than another designer? Diba? Parang ganun. So, here in this service, the architect is not being hired to design the project. The architect is being hired to prepare the design brief para makapagpabid si kliyente for architectural services. Anyway, under design brief preparation, nakalagay, the architect will state the project terms of reference, concept, objectives, etc., 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 required to bid out architectural services. And finally, we have the last pre-design service. This is called promotional services. Okay, promotional services. Nakalagay dito, there are some projects that may require promotional activities to generate support and acceptance from the government or from the public. In cases like this, pwedeng si architect yung pahanin na agent ng owner for promotional services. What does this mean? Like, projects requiring promotional services. This is usually parang projects na medyo, I don't want to say controversial, pero malalaking project that requires, well, lahat ng mga project kasi they require clearances from the government. Pero one project comes to mind. The project that I often use as an example is, I don't know if you remember yung Nickelodeon something park in Palawan that made the headlines like maybe a couple of years ago. I can't remember exactly when. Pero if you don't remember, let me recap what I remember. I remember na the news outlets announced that parang Nickelodeon yata was thinking of parang building this water park. I can't remember exactly what kind of park it was in Palawan. And the moment the news broke out, the backlash was kind of immediate. I don't know if you remember, but people were very vocal about the project being a bad idea. People thought it was a bad idea. It might ruin the delicate ecosystems of Palawan, etc., and that the government should never allow the project to proceed. Okay. The project was eventually shelved. No, hindi naman na yun natuloy. I think parang months later, I saw a headline saying, Nickelodeon abandoned yata. I'm sorry if I can't remember if it was Nickelodeon. Basta, whatever it was. Okay. But the point is, the idea was abandoned. And that probably for that's the good thing. Parang that's a good thing, I think. Na dapat talaga. I really think it was a bad idea. But I'm just using that as an example because kind of problem. Don't get me wrong, I'm not implying that I support that project in particular. But I'm just saying that's a good example of a project that requires promotional activities. Kailangan i-promote siya to generate support because you saw, di ba, there was little support from the public, much less support from the government as well. So, projects kasi like that, na hindi sinusuporta ng publiko or ng gobyerno, there's a good chance hindi matutuloy yung mga ganyang project eh. So, some projects may require promotional activities. And ang sinasabi lang natin is, if a client needs promotional activities, we can hire an architect to render the service. Anong gagawin ng architect in this service? Siya yung magpo-promote? Like parang, no, not necessarily. The job is to produce, to coordinate all activities necessary for promotion. No? Like, it's up to you what kind of promotions you're going to do, but I would imagine you'd have to go on TV and radio shows to explain the idea. You'd have to maybe do ads on the paper to explain to the public why it's not really a bad idea. You'd have to mga iba pang promotional activities like that. Parang gagawa ka ng website explaining this and that, talking to news outlets nga, etc., being interviewed. Mga ganun promo ba? Okay? And basically, pwedeng architect yung kuhanin to parang take care of this whole promotional services requirement para hindi na masakit sa ulo ng kliyente. So this is a pre-designed service. Okay, manner of providing services. Ito, I'm going to only show this once kasi this is often true of all SPPs. These services can be rendered by the architect as an individual or with his staff or in association with other architects or other firms. Okay, so we're now at SPP document 202. As I was starting to say kanina, I think this is the SPP document that matters the most simply because this is the most stereotypical service that architects render. Okay? Ang pinaka, I wouldn't say it's the most basic, but ito yung pinaka-stereotypical. Like when you ask someone down the street, what do architects do? Ano ba yung architect do? They would probably say na yun yung mga nag-design ng bahay. Okay? And yung designing a bahay, designing a building, this is that service. To be more specific, we call it the regular design service. Regular design service. And that's why I think this is the most important. Not only is it the longest, it is also the parang stereotypical service of architects. Okay, so first things first, all of the standards we're about to discuss cover individual practice by a natural person or group practice by a corporation or partnership. We treat them the same. The standards are the same for both. Okay, if foreign architects wish to render this service here, they have to do so in compliance with RA 9266, meaning dapat meron silang temporary permit and dapat meron local counterpart. Okay, generally, BPO firms and KPO firms. Pag sinabing BPO, business process outsourcing. Pag KPO, knowledge process outsourcing. Generally speaking, they should not be able to render services unless they are architectural firms, meaning na meet nila yung 75% requirement. Oh, sorry, bumalik. Okay. All right, let's begin. So this is the regular design service. This is the service where you're hired to design something, a building for the client. In this service, you're primarily the advisor and the representative of the owner. Your job is to translate yung needs the owner, yung requirements the owner into spaces, into forms, into plans, into a building. Okay? And this service begins at the inception of the project. No, it begins from the beginning. But the more interesting thing is the end. It ends only when the project is completed and turned over to the owner. The design service, the regular design service, does not end when you finish the design. It ends when the building is finished and it's been turned over to the owner. That's when it ends. Okay, and you'll see that later when we talk about the 6 phases. So yeah, let's talk about that now, scope of services. The scope of this service, explaining what's involved, what's kasali and hindi kasali, it's best discussed in this framework. We have to tell you that the service is divided into 6 phases, 6 parts or 6 phases. The project definition phase, the schematic design phase, the design development phase, the contract document phase, bidding phase, and construction phase. Isa-isahin natin yan. Okay? In the old standards, 1979, kasi itong SPP documents was bago ito, 2000-something, di ko alam kung 2006 or 2010. Pero in the old version of the standards, yung mga 1979, UAP document, etc., this service was only 4 phases now. No, it used to be 4 phases, but now it's 6. Why am I mentioning this? Because I sometimes still see old reviewers that were handed down from older schoolmates, hand-me-down reviewers. Sometimes nakikita ko 4 phases now of the regular design service. The moment you see na apat yung phases of the service, you know right away that that's obsolete because it's based on the 1979 standard of service. In the new standard, in this current standard, as you can see, we have 6 eh. Kaya dapat 6 yan. If it says 4, luma na yan, do everyone a favor and delete the file. Okay, kasi umiikot pa rin siya. And some people, tamad pagbasa ng SPP, ang binabasa reviewers, ng mga summary, and that summary is for the old one. You shouldn't study that. No one should study that. Okay. Again, do everyone a favor, delete mo na para hindi na maipamana sa next batch. But yeah, it has to have 6 phases. And now we're going to explain what exactly you're expected to do in each phase. So the service begins with the project definition phase. This is the first phase of service. So from the name, project definition, we sort of already know what's going to happen here. Now, this phase is all about defining the project, defining the requirements of the owner. So in this phase, you are going to try to get the owner to define the requirements. Okay. In turn, i-inform mo si owner ano naman yung technical requirements ng mga requirement na sinasabi niya. Because the owner will tell you, gusto ko 2 stories, gusto ko ganito, gusto ko may pool. It's your job naman to explain, like, technically, what does that entail? No, what is it going to require? No, to implement yung mga gusto ni owner. That's your job. And also, explanation of the fees. How much, diba, mahal ba yung pool, mga ganyan. Including your professional fees. Although, ang comment ko kasi lagi dito, by the time you get to the project definition phase, the professional fees should have been explained already. Kasi may kontratak na dapat by now. Diba? So, I just find that a bit strange. But anyway, that's a minor comment. So, to be more specific, what are you expected to produce? What's your expected output? So, you're expected to consult with the owner to ascertain, to understand ano yung kanyang requirements, and to create out the conceptual framework and requirements. Ang bottom line, requirements. Okay, requirements. You gather all relevant data to define the requirements for the project because in this phase, you're just trying to understand ano ba exactly yung ipinapadesign sa'yo ng kliyente. That's the goal of this phase. You review and refine the requirements, you translate them into a program, and then at the end of it, dapat meron kang initial construction cost estimate. No, we call it the SPPCC, Statement of Probable Project Construction Cost. Pero initial version, meron kang first version of the estimate. Like you're telling the owner, I estimate that this house would cost 7 million. Okay, that's your first version of the estimate. So at the end of this phase, you would have defined the project. Dapat you already understand well ano yung ina-expect ni owner, ano yung gusto niyang ipa-design sa'yo para pwede mo na simulang i-design. Kasi you understand na ano yung i-design. So, by the end of this phase, you know what to do, you know what to design, so you begin designing. That's the next phase. This is where you begin the design, the schematic design phase. So this phase it consists of the preparation of schematic design studies based on the project definition phase. Ang goal is to produce conceptual plans or schematic plans. Okay, I'm highlighting that word, conceptual, because when you see the word conceptual, you should know right away that's the schematic design phase. Ito sa phase na yung lumabas in terms of conceptual plans. Okay, so more specific breakdown of your duties and responsibilities. So here in this phase, you evaluate the program of the owner, you evaluate the schedule, the budget, the site, you propose how to deliver the design, the project. You prepare initial line drawings that represent your design study. Take note, hindi pa to actual floor plans. These are just initial line drawings representing design studies. And then you update your estimates. Now you submit an updated statement of the probable project construction cost, SPPCC. Essentially estimate. Okay. Okay, so at the end of it, at the end of the schematic design phase, you would have a scheme already. No, you have a approved scheme. Ideally, nagkapirmahan kayo, no, like kung ano yung scheme na napili niya, pirma siya, para alam mo na, yun yung gagamitin mo in the next phase. Ano ba yung next phase? The next phase kasi is the design development phase. This is the phase where you fully develop your scheme, your design. No, you fully flesh out mo na siya. So using the approved scheme from the previous phase, approved conceptual plans, you're not going to produce the design development documents. Pag sinabing DD or design development documents, we're talking about floor plans, elevation, sections, and other drawings, perspectives, ganyan. This is also the first phase where you're expected to produce specifications, not specifications, but the version of specs you're producing here, outline specs pa lang, hindi pa siya technical specs. Pag sinabing outline specs, usually, ano lang yan eh, well, in my experience, usually parang tabulation siya of the finishes, ano yung mga, ini-imagine yung finishes, sometimes conting specs din ng structure, like this, would this be a steel column, would this be a concrete column, things like that. No? Pero hindi pa siya yung three-part spec na makapal, hindi pa yun, neither pa yun. Your DD plans are expected to have a diagram now of the construction system, so dapat medyo may indications naman, realistic indications na yun dapat ng columns and intersections, beams, mga ganyan. Realistic yung mga headroom because of the beams. Realistic dapat yung, yeah, it's a plan, basically. And also, of course, update mo yung estimates, yung SPPCs. Okay? So, at the end of the design development phase, ang expectation is the design would be fully developed na, no? Parang fully realized na dapat yung vision mo. On board na si client, nagkapirmahan kayo dapat ng DD plans para alam natin lahat anong design yung napili. And ito na yung fully developed design. Okay? Ano pang remaining? Well, we have 3 phases remaining. The 4th phase is the contract document phase. So, in the contract document phase, you're going to take the approved DD plans to produce contract documents. Kaya mga contract documents phase. Pag sinabing contract documents, basically, construction drawings. No? Some people wonder, ano pa yung gagawin mo dito? Plans and elevations na pala yung laman ng DD plans. Ano pa gagawin mo sa CD? Construction drawings to. Hindi to DD plans lang na floor plan. Ito sobrang detailed, sobrang maraming dimensions and tags dapat. It's so detailed, it's detailed enough that you can hand it to a contractor and the contractor can build it. It has to be that detailed. Okay? So, yun yung contract document phase. Okay? You're expected to produce specs, this time detailed specs to technical specifications. Okay? Ito na yung makapal na specs na three-part specifications. And also, at the end of it, your output is 7 sets of the contract documents. No? 7 sets ng lahat ng construction drawings, technical specs, lahat ng mga yan for the purposes of obtaining a building permit. In the old standard, kung may next steps ninyo na 5 sets lang, mali yun, that's the old standard. 7 sets na tayo. Okay? Other duties during the contract document phase, i-update mo yung estimates. You'll notice that the updating ng estimates, it happens at the end of each design phase. Kasi parang the idea is, as the design becomes clearer, as you finalize the design, as you refine the design, the estimate should also become clearer and more refined. That's why you have to update it. Kasi there's a chance may konting galaw pa to eh. Yung design medyo nag-adjust pa in this phase. So you have to update din yung estimate. And part din ng phase na to, helping the owner get permits. I'm just simplifying this one. Basically, assisting the owner in obtaining permits from the government. Okay, the next phase. So you have now your contract documents. I just said contract documents are parang good enough to build, right? Detailed enough na pwede nang ipatayo. So the next thing is looking for someone to do that, looking for someone to build it. And that's why bidding and nego yung next phase. This is the phase where the client is now looking for a contractor. Okay, kasama mo ba sa service mo? Again, yes. This is the 5th phase of your service. What would you need to do during this phase? Bakit kasama ka pa dyan? Marami kang gagawin actually. Primarily, ikaw ang gagawa ng bid docs. Okay, for bidding, ikaw ang gagawa ng bid documents like we'll start with the basic invitation to bid, instructions to bidders, forms for contract letting, mga format, etc. Format ng bidders' proposals, so yung format ng bid. General conditions, mga ganyan. Ikaw gagawa ng lahat. Okay? Tutulungan mo rin daw si owner to establish a list of bidders. Baka wala siyang masyadong kilala. So it's your job to help. For competitive bids, typically bidding is competitive. So parang kanyari, meron 5 contractors bidding for the same project. It's your duty to provide the bid documents to all of them. No? Complete sets, as many as needed for the bidding. Pero take note, 7 sets lang yung kasama sa service mo. Anything beyond the first 7 that you give to the client, kanyari, bibigyan ka ng 7 and Suppose 5 ton ginamit for the permit. Tapos, may 2 extra sets, pero kailangan pa ng 4 na sets. Okay? Para lang makompleto yung bid docs for the bidders. Then, yung anything beyond those first 7, so meaning yung extra 4, dapat may additional bayad. Okay? Anyway, but it's your job. Ikaw ang mag-provide ng bid docs. Ikaw ang mag-conduct ng mga pre-bid conferences with the bidders. All of the meetings. Ikaw ang sasagot ng tanong ng bidders. This is your job during bidding. You assist the owner in getting the bids. You assist the owner in analyzing the bids. Gagawa ka ng abstract of bid, evaluation, magre-recommend ka. By default, trabaho mo to. Okay, ang presumption dito is walang construction manager to do this. No? Normally kasi pag nagkaroon ng construction manager in the picture, some of the things here would actually be the job now of the CM. Pero wala namang guarantee na may CM. Supposing walang CM, by default, according to our standards, this is the architect of records job. Paggawa ng notice of award, notice to proceed, etc. Paano kung nego? Like, pag sinabing nego, hindi na nagpabid. Like, may kilala siyang contractor, si owner, kunyari, pinsan niya, kinuha ng contractor yun. Kinuha ng contractor. Bigagawin ko ba si architect? Ang sabi ng standard, yes, everything is the same. The only difference is, the architect is dealing with one contractor na lang instead of several bidders. The only difference is that. But other than that, it's the same. Trabaho pa rin niya magbigay ng bid docs, trabaho niya sagutin yung tanong, kung may tanong, trabaho niyang i-analyze yung offer, tignan kung pwede ko bang bawasan, pwede ko bang humingi ng discount, overprice pa, helping the owner analyze, preparing the contract, no, yung mga notice of award, mga ganyan. Everything's the same except that one contractor na lang yung post. Okay, some important notes on the bid documents. Okay. So again, the bid documents are the documents given to the bidders, basically plans, specs, and other contract, basically the contract documents in it. We call them bid documents kasi they're issued to bidders. Okay, bakit binibigay sa bidders yung plans and specs and other, documents? Kasi the bidders have to submit a price, and to submit the price, they need to understand exactly ano ba yung ipapatayo, that's why plans and specs. And generally, ano bang setup ng project? That's why you have the general conditions and all of those other, documents. Pero ibibigay yan ni architect, no? Si architect ang mag-produce ng bid docs. Pero some notes of the bid documents. The bid documents are only being loaned to the bidders daw. Hindi yan binibenta. Parang pinapahiram lang sa kanila. They're being loaned to the bidders. The bidders have to pay an amount, yes. But this is just an amount sufficient to cover the cost of preparation, reproduction, and printing, and delivery of the documents. The money that the bidders are paying, because they have to pay for the bid docs, hindi yan libre. They have to pay for it. But we're just clarifying, the money is because they're borrowing it. Okay, we're not selling the plans to them, we're only lending it to them. If they ask, so we're only borrowing the plans lang, why do we have to pay for it? Because it costs money to reproduce the plans. And it's, as bidders, sa kanila dapat yung cost na yun. Kasi yung kawawa naman si architect ko sa kanya pa yung cost ng reproduction. Diba? So, they're paying for reproduction, but they're not buying the plans. And that's why, nakalagay dito, the plans are the intellectual property of the architect and they must be returned after the bid. Hiram lang yun, kailangan siya i-break. Okay? Neither the owner nor the bidders are allowed to use the bid documents for any other purpose other than what's agreed between the owner and the architect. Ibabalik dapat yung plans. Bakit? Again, because hindi presyong bili yung presyong binabayaran nila. Presyong pampa-blueprint lang yun dapat. Okay? If they're asking, so, ba't kami nagbayad kung hindi naman pala namin magiging pagmamayari yung plano? If we're not going to own the plans, why did you make us pay? We made them pay because of the privilege of using the plans and also to be able to reproduce the plans. But if they want to buy the design, obviously it's going to cost much more than that. Okay? If they ask, how much ba para ma-retain yung plan? Bayaran nila same ng binabayaran yun. I mean, it costs much more. No? The design fee is much more than the cost of bid plans. Okay? Ang unfair naman na parang at the cost of blueprints, nakuha nila yung buong design. Diba? Samantala si owner, magkano ibabayad sa'yo to get that design, to be able to use the design. Diba? So obviously, it's just lent to them. In real life, I'm sure many of you will react. In real life, sir, parang wala namang ganyan. Wala pa akong nakitang bidding, sir, na binalik sa bidders yung plans. Ako rin. Kaya ako rin. Wala pa akong nakitang ganun. Laging hindi yan kinukuha. In my experience, at least. But if we're just talking about the exam, don't mind that. Kaya huwag mo nang isipin na sa office namin ganito, sa experience namin ganyan. Ang nakalagay sa standards is dapat ibalik. Pag tinanong ko sa exam, just say, yes, ibabalik siya. Okay? Huwag mo nang problemahin kung binabalik pa talaga sa inyo or not. Sa totoong po. Pero yeah, sa totoong buhay dapat. It's just that, I'm just speaking from experience. No? Typical kalakaran is hindi na siya nababalik. Pero dapat ibalik yun. Anyway, so yun yung bidding phase. The last phase is the construction phase. So may contractor na, pinapatayo na yung building. Ano pang ginagawa mo? Di ba hinarga for design? Ba't nandiyan ka pa sa construction? No? Why do you have to stay? Because you still have things to do. Okay? What things? Number one, ikaw ang magde-design kapag merong issues between the owner and the contractor about the execution of the work or the interpretation of the drawings. Hindi sila magkasundo how to interpret the drawing. It's your job to decide ano yung tamang interpretation. Hindi sila magkasundo, tama ba yung pagkakagawa ng contractor naman? It's your call to make. That's your job. By default, it's also your job to prepare change orders, to check yung mga bond, yung mga guarantee, mga payment bond, performance bond, etc. It's also your job. Again, if you're thinking, sa totoong buhay, Sir, CM ang gumagawa niyan, again, we're not assuming na may CM right now. Okay, without the CM, and besides, nasa standards na yun. Basta ang default sa standards natin is trabaho to ng architect. Okay? To prepare ng change orders. Probably the most important job is this, the periodic site visits. You might know about this already. Now, during the construction phase, you are expected to periodically visit the site for you to familiarize yourself with the progress of the work, with the quality of the work, para makita mo rin kung nasusunod ba yung contract documents mo or not. But keyword here is periodic. Okay, of course, you're not expected to do full-time or exhaustive on-site supervision. Hindi yun yung expectation. No, periodic lang. What does periodic mean? Bakit tatanungin niya pa, ano ba yung yan? Every 2 weeks, every week, every month? Walang standard on that. Periodic means from time to time. Periodic means as needed. It's kind of your decision. It's kind of parang your judgment call mo na yan. What periodic means to you. Pero, yeah, typically, depending on the phase of the project, sometimes you'd have to be there weekly. Sometimes you'd have to be there every 2 weeks. Sometimes once a month. Periodic means as needed, as the situation calls for it. Hindi siya fixed. Otherwise, they would have said it. Kung every week yan or every month, they would have said that. Instead, they said periodic. From time to time. Okay? So anyway, it's not your duty to do full-time supervision. Hindi full-time supervision ang gagawin mo dito. Paminsan-minsan ka dapat sa site. And therefore, you should not be held responsible for the contractor's mistakes. No? For the contractor's failure to carry out the work in accordance with the contract documents. It's not your duty na bantayan, hindi ka bantay ng contractor, hindi ka full-time supervisor. So hindi pwedeng aawayin ka ni owner na kanyari nagkamali si contractor, tapos ang sasabihin sa ni owner is, kasi naman architect, kasi ang dalang-dalang mo, parang you seldom visit. Okay, you seldom visit if once a week ka lang kasi dito. If you would visit more often, no? Kung araw-araw ka sana, sana nakita mo yan agad. Ngayon, kung kailan na full height na yung pader, tsaka may papatibag, kung nandito ka ng Monday, maaga pa lang na-fix na dapat yan, nakita mo na agad. You just tell the client, it's not my job to be here 5 days a week. It's not my job to watch over their work. So my job is to do the design, which I already did. No, provided na wala namang mali sa plano ko, maayos naman yung plano ko, obvious naman kung saan dapat yung one, the contractor should have no excuse to get this wrong. Okay? And kung magkamali siya, ayusin niya. Kung kahit kailan mo makita yung mali, hindi dapat issue. Okay? Basta hindi ka dapat i-blame ng owner for the mistakes of the contractor. It's not your job. Hindi ka tagabantay ng contractor. Okay? But anyway, you still visit periodically, and every time you see any issues, you must report to the client any defect, any deficiency that you see. You must condemn yung mga ganyan, yung mga defect or deficiency. You must condemn them or reject them. Some students kasi they get scared when they were condemned. Like, parang, what does that mean, condemn? Like, parang threatening, parang ang agresibo pakinggan ng condemn. Condemn just means ipapunch list. No, it just means you're just rejecting it. You're just officially letting the contractor know, contractor, I see this, I see what you're doing. I do not think that this complies with the contract documents. I think you need to correct that because it looks wrong. Okay? Hindi mo naman like titibagin on the spot. No? Hindi mo naman like, hindi ka na yung condemn. You're just punch listing it, essentially. The moment you see na may problem, i-condemn or i-reject, or kung I mean word na condemning, i-punch list mo agad. Kasi it would be unethical, like we talked about, it would be unethical for you to keep silent when you see na mali na yung ginagawa ng contractor. Also, during the construction phase, by default, it is your duty to evaluate billings of the contractors. Most contractors would bill maybe once a month at the end of the month. I-bill nila yung mga natapos nilang trabaho. Ipapasa yan sa owner, but then the owner would probably not be able to evaluate, would not know how to evaluate this. Nakita lang yan, sinisingil ako ng contractor ko ng 800,000. Kaya sabi niya, yung mga natapos this month, worth 800K daw yun. The owner wouldn't really know how to check kung tama ba yung 800K or not. Napasa sa yung billing. Architect, here's the billing. The contractor's claiming 800K for this month. Please let me know if this is correct or not. If it is, I'll pay 800. So it's your duty naman to take the billing, look at it, and then go to the site to confirm kung tama ba yung binibill ng contractor. Meaning, kung talaga bang natapos niya na yung mga sinasabi niyang natapos, kung talaga bang ganun yung value ng mga natapos niya, kung talaga bang acceptable na. Okay? If they are, then endorse, approve mo yung billing para mabayaran. Kung hindi, I don't know, mag-comment ka, kausapin mo sa contractor, pa-revise mo, mag-usap kayo. But it's your duty to do this. It's your duty to do this during the construction phase. Quick note lang, this is obvious naman, whenever you approve any billing, you're basically telling the client, yes client, nag-site ako, yes nakikita ko, ganyan nga yung natapos ng contractor, and yes, lahat ng natapos niya, good quality, acceptable lahat. Wala akong punch list, wala akong ipapakorek. Lahat yan, maganda yung pagkakagawa, and therefore lahat yan pwede mo nang bayaran. Kasi ang basic principle natin is, kung hindi pa tapos, kung hindi pa acceptable, dapat hindi mo na nila pabayaran. Hindi dapat pabayaran sa kliyente. So, kung in-endorse mo na pwede nang bayaran, in-approve mo yung billing, dapat talagang maayos yung gawa. At, well, dapat nagawa. That's the most basic thing. And dapat maayos. Kasi kung may punch list ka pa, if you still are not satisfied with the quality of the work, dapat hindi yan mabill. Dapat hindi yan mabill sa kliyente. Okay, and then the client relies on your judgment here and your honesty. Okay, what if the client really insists on you being there full-time? All you need to do is tell the client, this is not part of my service. If you are available to do it, sabi mo kay client, I can do it, I'm willing to do it, but you'd have to pay me a separate fee, this time for full-time supervision. That's a different service, we'll tackle that in SPP 204. But again, never do that for free. What if willing ka? No? What if sir, ano ko, like, bored lang ako sa bahay, alam ako ibang gagawin, gusto ko actually mag-site full-time. Can I do that? Well, no one's going to stop you, but the question becomes, is there anything wrong with what you're doing? I'd say yes, there's something wrong with what you're doing because what you're essentially doing is you're rendering services for free. Okay, you're rendering the full-time supervision service for free, and that's unethical. That's unethical. Because why? Because the Code of Ethics says you shouldn't do anything for free, right? And speaking of doing things for free or undercharging, I forgot to talk about this earlier, but I have to reiterate lang a quick point about undercharging and working for free. Because some people, sometimes they don't see what the big deal is kasi inisip nila, paano kung willing naman nga ako? Like, kunyari, for my own personal growth, gusto ko mag-site full-time. Okay? Kasi gusto ko maging gamay ko yung construction, ganyan, blah, blah. First of all, you're probably not qualified to do it, to be full-time supervisor. Kasi dapat magaling ka sa construction to be full-time supervisor. Pero if you're thinking, well, I'm just doing it for free, wala namang mawawala. As long as you're not doing full-time supervision, it's probably fine. Pero ang problem is, if you're doing full-time supervision and you're not charging for it, kanyari magaling ka, alam mo kung paano gawin yung trabaho, you're qualified, and you're going to do it for free. Since willing ka naman. Apart from the fact na explicitly pinagbabawal yung working for free sa Code of Ethics, it's also clearly unethical kasi you're devaluing the service. Okay? You're teaching people na this service can be obtained for free. You're teaching people to think na yung full-time supervision is part of the regular design service. Or hindi dapat, no need to pay for full-time supervision. Mali na bagay lang yung full-time supervision. Okay? At the same time, you're also making it harder for those na nag-full-time supervision you might make it harder for them to charge for their service. Because why? Because you devalue the service by giving it away for free. Okay? So if you're thinking na, kasi ang mindset ng iba, ako lang naman yung dehado eh. Ba't ba ako pakikialaman ng iba? Ako lang naman yung kawawa. Ako naman yung, sino bang na-agabyado? Ako naman. Sino bang na-exploit? Ako naman. So ba't pa nila ako pakikialaman? Well, because hindi lang ikaw yung na-agrabyado na. That's what we're saying. Hindi lang ikaw yung na-exploit. You are affecting everyone else in the profession. You're devaluing the service. You're the reason why people won't pay the right price because you keep undercharging. You're the reason why people think that architectural services only cost that much because you only charge that much. You're the reason why hindi makasingan ng tama yung iba because there are people like you who charge low. Okay? So, before you think na ako lang naman yung kawawa, wag na lang akong pakialaman. I'm telling you, hindi lang ikaw. That's why pinapakialaman ka ng iba. That's why people don't like you. It's because what you're doing affects them. Because clearly, if it only affects you, then why would we care? Diba? No one's going to care. If it sounds like I'm ranting, I'm not really ranting. And if you're thinking, sobrang unnecessary, sobrang strict about fees and like that, well, I'm neutral about it. Okay? I mean, I don't want to say this. Don't ever entertain this train of thought in the exam. Pero I can also understand naman why some people would parang not be able to charge, charge ka correctly kung talagang desperate na talaga for clients. Like, kunyari talagang wala ng kita. Like, sometimes you take whatever's available. So even if it means getting less than what you should be getting, kung wala ka na talagang pera, just to put food on the table, I would understand that personally. But in the exam, I'm telling you, do not entertain this train of thought. No matter what circumstances they throw at you in the exam, the code of ethics is clear. You're supposed to charge the correct fee. And we explain naman why they're very strict about it. Diba? Kasi nga, the moment you do this, the moment you undercharge is the moment you begin to devalue the service. Okay? So anyway, yun lang. So bottom line, kung talagang kailangan niya na full-time supervise ka, tell them it's a different service, so you have to pay me a different fee for this. Okay? So yun. Manner providing the regular design service, there are two options. Meron ng term for this dun sa compensation guidelines from 2018. Option 1 is yung DAEDS na tinatawag, Detailed Architectural and Engineering Design Services. Ito yung may isang kontrata lang between the architect and the owner and sub-consultancy contracts between the architect and the engineers. Ito yung si client, ayaw ng maraming kausap, ayaw ng maraming kontrata. So, kinuha ka niya as architect, sabi niya sa'yo, architect, I'll pay you. Just tell me how much ikaw nang kumuha ng engineers. Ayaw ka nang humanap ng engineers ko. Just get me the best. Assemble your team. And then tell me how much bayaran kita. Tayo na lang mag-usap. Bahala na kayo mag-usap ng mga engineer. That's option 1. And option 2 naman is yung owner kumontrata directly ng lahat ng consultants. So meron siyang architect, then kumontrata siya ng structural niya, plumbing, electrical, etc. So those are the two options. Okay? In the methods of compensation, meron na silang acronym for these. For option 1, DAEDS, D-A-E-D-S, Detailed Architectural and Engineering Design Services. No, kasama yung engineering, kumbaga. Option 2 is DADS, D-A-D-S, Detailed Architectural Design Services lang. Walang E, walang engineering. Okay? So, it's important to note, no, especially in option 1, ikaw yung kumuha, ikaw yung nag-assemble ng team, kumuha ka ng engineers, no? You're supposed to be the lead professional in the team of consultants. That's number 1. And number 2, but even though you're the lead professional, even though ikaw yung parang bida, you have the loudest voice, ikaw yung nag-lead, that doesn't mean that you're going to carry their professional liability. Kanya-kanya pa rin kayo. But you do not answer for the electrical engineer, kumbaga. Pagka nagkaroon ng problema sa electrical at nagkaroon ng sumabot ng, sampahan ng kaso or something, hindi ka damay. Kasi hindi mo naman professional responsibility yung electrical design. Okay, yun lang. Okay, now, SPP 2 also classifies projects into 10. Okay, this is going to be more useful sa compensation. Okay, pero, kasi iba-iba yung single per group Pero, bottom line, there are 10 groups. And it's important that you understand ano yung difference in 10 groups. Okay? So, there are 10 groups. The first group is simple. Buildings of the simplest utilization, and character. Presumably, these are buildings that are fairly simple to design. Hindi siya masyadong stressful daw i-design. Kasi parang the project doesn't demand na sobrang ganda dapat. Again, maybe I'm putting it wrongly. I wouldn't say na hindi naman demand na sobrang ganda niya dapat. Pero like, in terms of finishes, no, it's not as fancy as the other groups. No? So anyway, under the group simple, buildings of simplicity, utilization, and character, we have armory, bakery, agricultural buildings, freight facilities, hangars, industrial buildings, parking structures, printing plants, public markets, service garages, simple loft-type buildings, warehouses, planta, and other similar buildings, mga factory, mga ganyan. Presumably, they're relatively easier. I wouldn't say easy, but relatively easier to design because in terms of finishes, for example, hindi ganon ano yung requirement, ka-intense yung requirement, I guess. That's maybe how I would say it. So I'm not saying pwedeng pangit. No, it's just must go yung ibang groups. I'll say that. Okay. Group 2 is moderately complex buildings. Now, buildings of moderate complexity of plan or design. This is the biggest group. It's a long list. I'm not going to read all, but I'll read out a few. So you have gallery, bank, call centers, church, city hall or town hall. You have college buildings and dorms and fire stations and laundries. You have library, malls, motel, multi-story apartment, office buildings. Okay. You also have residential condo, police station, restaurants, fast food, retail, wholesale stores, schools, shopping centers, supermarkets. It's a long list, as you can see. Okay, ang advice ko nga lagi is, if it comes to this, so if in the exam you have to like, parang guess anong group siya, because tinatanong ko anong group siya, or because tinatanong ko kung ano yung tamang compensation. Compensation requires that you know the groupings. If you're unsure about any building, there's a chance it's group 2 because 1, it's a big group. No, it's a big group. And 2, normally it's easy to identify group 1 and group 3 kasi group 3 is exceptionally complex. Yung group 1 is simple. Normally, kapag binigyan ka ng simple, you know right away it's group 1. You can tell na parang that kapag binigyan niya yung group 1. And same for group 3, kapag exceptionally complex, medyo feel mo agad, this is exceptionally complex, group 3 yan. So, if you're given a building na parang hindi mo agad maklasify kung 1, 2, or 3 ba, my advice is choose 2. It's a big group, so there's a chance it's there. And second, the fact that you cannot classify it as either 1 or 3 probably means it's somewhere in the middle, probably means it's in 2. Okay, so it's fine, guys. So that's group 2, moderate. Group 3, exceptional. These are buildings of exceptional character and complexity, exceptionally complex buildings requiring lots of research, etc. Examples: aquarium, laboratory, nuclear facility, resorts, auditoriums, medical arts offices, airports, mental institutions, brewery, mortuary, cold storage, observatory, telecommunications, public health, convention research facilities, gym, stadium, hospital, theater, hotel, vet hospital, transport facilities, and other similar buildings. So these are complex to design and they're part of group number 3. Again, if you're thinking, para sa may groupings, di ba kailangan group? Iba-iba ang singil. Mas mataas ang singil sa group 3 compared sa group 2. Mas mataas ang singil sa group 2 compared sa group 1. Yun yung primary purpose why we're grouping them. It becomes helpful later as a compensation. Group 4 is residences. Okay, residences, meaning single detached houses, duplexes, row houses, shop houses, small apartment houses, and townhouses. So basically, maliliit na residential building. I will point out that high-rise residential, residential condominiums are not part of this. Yung residential condominium, I hope you noticed, is actually mentioned in Group 2. Okay, so hindi kasama yung residential condo sa Group 4 residential. Mga ano lang to, mga bahay, single detached, row house, including small apartments. Okay, small apartment houses and townhouses, but not condominiums. Group number 5 is monumental projects, monumental buildings and other facilities. Sample ng mga monumental building. exposition building, fair buildings, decorative buildings, mausoleum, memorial, monuments, museums, and other similar buildings. Again, mas mataas lalo yung single dyan. We have 5 groups remaining. Group number 6 is repetitive construction. Ito yung mga project where you do the design once, but it's implemented many times. Isang design, multiple times itatayo. Okay? That's group number 6. Group number 7 is housing project. Kind of the same thing. Isang beses mo din-design, pero ilang beses siyang itatayo. Pero the difference between this and 6 is this is specifically for housing projects. There's a slight difference kasi in how you compute the fee. The idea is the same eh. The idea is, maniningil ka every implementation, every time they construct it, you collect a fee. And the idea is same, palit ng palit yung fee mo, kasi parang royalty na lang siya. Pero may nakukuha ka every time. Pero medyo magkaiba sila lang ng computation. So group 7 is, again, you use this for housing projects. So itong group 6, repetitive construction, yes, but non-housing data, non-housing project. Group 8, projects involving extensive detailing, like when you're hired to do designs for built-in components or elements, built-in equipment, special fittings, architectural interiors, mga detalyadong cabinetry work, mga ganyan. These are group number 8, extensive detail. Ang idea here is mahirap, well, hindi ganun kadali gawin yung plans kasi sobrang detalyado, sobrang daming blow-up detail, sobrang kailangan pag-isipan down to the last detail yung drawings mo, yung design mo. So matrabaho siya. Ang problem sa group 8 kasi is matrabaho gawin pero hindi ganun kamahal yung cost nito. It's just cabinets most likely, so hindi siya ganun kamahal. Yung CISA guidelines ng compensation, pag group 8 mas mataas ang percentage para hindi ka lugi. Okay? Pero anyway, that's group number 8. Let's go to group number 9, renovations. So this is for, there's an existing building that you have to alter, you have to renovate or rehabilitate or retrofit or expand, or you have to add an existing building. That's group number 9. And finally, group number 10, my least favorite, to be honest, expert advice. I don't like this kasi, well, look at it. This is when you're hired out to render an opinion or give advice, clarification or explanation on technical matters. My problem with this is it's not a building type. Unlike, it's not a type of a project, no? Na you design. Now, unlike yung groups 1 to 9 na parang they are specific project types or building types, ito, you're rendering advice. Why do I find this to be parang strange, no? Nakasali siya sa list. Kasi, recall where we are. Okay, we are in SPP Document 202. The service is about designing buildings for the client. Okay, we're just classifying yung projects. Yung mga ipapadesign sa'yo, we're classifying them into different classifications. Ito lang yung nasa list na hindi ipapadesign sa'yo. Kasi you're just being consulted. So I just find it, for me talaga, it doesn't make sense na meron ganito sa list. Maybe they just want na 10 yung list. Ayaw na natin legal sa 9. I'm not sure. But in any case, I'm not the biggest fan of this. But it's there. Now this is group number 10. Okay, compensation. As I hope you know, meron ng compensation guidelines, the detail nila lumabas in 2018. Each SPP document talks about compensation. Very generic yung laman, nothing specific. If I were you, I would skip your compensation parts and I'll just read yung compensation guidelines na nilabas in 2018. Okay, but if you want to read them, then they're there. Nakalagay dyan, pwede kang pumorsyento, which is the recommended. Pwede ka mag-MDPA, they don't recommend this, but if you want to go for it, hindi naman bawal, technically speaking. The total cost that you charge is the fee plus the reimbursables, etc. Again, these things, ang recommendation ko, basahin yung compensation guidelines kasi hindi ito complete. Like for example, a very important missing item dito sa compensation portion ng SPP is ilang percent ang singil. Like kunyari, pinag-design ka nga ng airport, group 3, ilang percent ang sisingil mo doon? Ilang percent ng construction cost is your fee? They don't really say it here. They say it dun sa later guidelines from 2018. But it's there if you want to understand them. Let's go to the more important things, which is yung after ng compensation. Ito, owner's responsibilities. Okay, so this is the more important last part of SPP 202, yung owner's responsibilities. Kasi so far, the first parts of SPP 2 have mostly been about ano yung dapat gawin ng architect. Let's now talk about ano ba yung dapat gawin ni owner. Okay? So, ito yung responsibilities ng owner. As owner, obviously, sa kanya manggagaling yung requirements. Kwenta niya yung requirements niya. Dapat meron siyang designated authorized representative, especially if the client is the type that like goes out of town a lot of times. So someone needs to stay here to make decisions. So dapat may authorized representative siya. Important job is to make decisions quickly, okay, para hindi madelay yung project. It's also the duty of the owner to give the architect a certified survey of the site, kumuha ng surveyor to establish the boundaries of the lot. It's the owner's duty to pay for all services required. Honestly, paulit-ulit yung pay. Pay for the design services, pay for legal services, etc. Pay for reimbursable expenses. Bottom line, to pay for everything. Obviously, that's the owner's job. Next, it's also the owner's duty if the owner observes or becomes aware of anything that may impair the successful implementation of the project, the owner has the duty to give the architect notice, to tell the architect. Sabihin sa architect, kunyari, example ng any issue that could impair the implementation of the project. Kunyari, na-bankrupt na pala yung business niya. So, hindi niya na-i-open yung second branch. Si architect hindi pa rin alam. Todo ano pa rin. Todo pag-drawing, nag-hire pa rin ng draftsman and all of that. Yung pala hindi matutuloy yung project. So, obviously, may pagkukulang si owner doon kasi kanyang, it's his or her responsibility to tell the architect right away. Architect, FYI, as a result of the pandemic, we're not going to be opening any more branches. Please stop whatever you're doing. I don't think we'll be opening branches anytime soon. Backup and company, ganyan. So, that's the owner's responsibility. Okay? Or hindi na-approve yung loan. No? The project is contingent on the approval of this loan, which was not approved. So, in other words, hindi na matutuloy yung project. Tell the architect right away. Kasi huwag mo nang patagalin. That would be unethical. Other conditions, the architect's fee is based on the project construction cost. There are many methods of compensation, but the one recommended is yung poporsyento ka sa PCC. Any additional services require additional compensation. Other things, other services may be needed to complete the project, such as services to acoustic engineers, illumination specialists, mural painters, sculptors, etc. This may be needed for some projects. All we're saying is if they're needed, they will be recommended by the architect for the approval of the owner. And these are to be paid for separately by the owner. In fact, the architect should collect an additional coordination fee. So, bottom line is, hindi yan dapat i-charge sa fee ng architect. Baka mamaya merong owner na hindi naiintindihan niya, na inisip ng owner. Yung mural ko sa lobby, dapat si architect gumawa nun eh. Pero since hindi niya kaya, kumuha kami ng artist, gagawin ko na lang, i-charge ko sa kanya. Kasi dapat, kung magaling siya mag-paint, dapat wala na akong artist na pupukanin. That's wrong. Kaya hindi naman trabaho, hindi part ng service natin yung mural niya. Actually, all of this. Okay? So, ang point is, kung kukuha man tayo ng specialist contractor or consultant for these things, dapat separate payment. Okay, separate payment. Hindi i-charge the architect. If anything, dapat nga, dagdagan pa yung bayad kay architect. Ang tawag daw is coordination fee. Okay? Next. Paano kapag si client nanghihingi ng scale model or nanghihingi ng 3D model or walkthrough? Sa standards natin, these are not included. Kung kailangan ni owner, kailangan niya bayaran separately. Okay, we're not talking about the perspective, but we're talking about scale models and 3D walkthrough, 3D models. Separate, by default, separate separate payment. Okay, unless napag-usapan niyo from the start ng kasama. Okay, per diem is parang per day allowance. Per diem plus traveling and living expenses shall be charged to the owner whenever the architect or his representative must perform services more than 100 kilometers away from his established office as it appears in the architect's letterhead. So, yan yung requirement. Kapag ganyan kalayo yung pupuntahan mo, I'll cross-check this against yung methods of compensation. Di ko alam kung binago nila yung 250. Pero, right now, let's just stick to 100. If you have to work more than 100 kilometers away from your office, bukod sa normal fee mo, there must be a per diem or a per day parang allowance. Okay? And ito na sabi natin, if the owner desires additional sets of documents, contract documents, pwede naman, pero additional payment, of course. Paano kung may change orders si owner? Meron siya mga pinakabago, like, natapos na yung design, nagkasundo na, so ginawa na yung CD plans, nagbibidding na, but the owner then realizes, architect, you know what? I realized your second version was better. We should have gone with that. I'm sorry I made you do a third version, but I just realized now the second version is better. Can we go back to it? This would probably involve additional time. Ipaparedraw yung architect yung plano sa kanyang tao or baka siya mismo yung mag-redraw. Dapat may additional fee yan. Okay. Next, paano naman kapag pinatigil si architect sa kanyang design work? Kunyari, midway through the design development phase, tinawagan siya ng owner, the owner says, architect, the loan was not approved. We don't have money to build this, so I guess the project is cancelled now. Please stop whatever you're doing. We're not going to be able to proceed. What should the owner pay the architect, or should the owner pay? The answer is yes, the owner should pay, but the owner should only pay whatever amount is due at that stage, at the stage of suspension or abandonment of the work. Like, meaning, kung nasa gitna siya ng DD phase, maybe collect 50% of the amount reserved for the DD phase. Parang ganun. No, parang kunin mo lang yung fair amount. No, kailangan lang babayaran ka for the work that you perform. The primary service in the regular design service, is the preparation of plans. And that's why once the plans are done, once the architect has prepared all of these plans, then the architect has completed the detailed design and contract documents phase of the project, which is equal to 90% of the work. Again, tapos mo na yung contract documents, you're 90% done with the job. Because the remainder, after the contract document phase, yung bidding, yung periodic supervision, those are parang not the primary job. I mean, they're part of the job, but the primary job is the preparation of the plans. Okay, so when you're done with the plans, you're 90% done now because that's 90% of your work, and so you should collect 90% of your fee. Okay, I will emphasize that. So old standards, the UAP document 202, that figure, 90% down, that figure, it used to be 85%. Okay, it used to be 85%. But FYI, in the newer standards, it's 90%. So pag natapos mo yung contract documents, you should collect 90% of the fee. And therefore, kung natapos mo yung contract documents pero hindi natuloy yung project, you should still collect 90% of the fee because you completed the contract documents. And that's 90% of your job. Okay, so if the client tells you, kanyari nga hindi natuloy yung construction kasi hindi na-approve yung loan, pero natapos mo yung contract documents, you collect 90% to your client. What if the client calls you and tells you, architect, I understand that I need to pay you money for this because you did do a lot of work already. I'm just not sure that 90% is fair, architect, kasi hindi naman natuloy yung project eh. Diba, hindi naman wala tayong ginawa at all, hindi na tayo umabot sa point na nag-mobilize yung contractor natin eh. So, I was just wondering, architect, bakit 90% yung ibibil mo sa akin? Parang hindi naman yata conscionable, parang hindi naman yata tama yung 90%. Parang taas lang. Okay, baka naman dapat bawasan ko yan. Again, the explanation, bakit 90 is, because our primary duty is design. And honestly, you've done the design part already. No, you've done the design part already. The remainder, yung mga periodic site supervision, etc., that's the small percentage remaining. Okay, so you explain to the client that the reason you're charging 90% of the fee is because you've done 90% of the job. And you just have to remind your client, client, you hired me to design the building for you. And you know that I already did that. I already finished the design. The only reason I'm not collecting 100% is because I'm supposed to visit it periodically. That's the parang a portion of my fee. But the part about design, I've completed it already. So it's only fair that you give me 90% of my fee because I already have done 90% of the job. Parang ganun. May something to that effect. Another potential issue, paano kapag nagtatagal yung construction period? Medyo specific yung process dito, which, to be honest, I'm not a big fan of. Nakalagay dito, portions of the building now are erected at different periods of time, therefore, tumatagal yung project. Kung mahaba yung construction period, the architect's burden of services increases. Ang sinasabi dito, dapat i-adjust proportionately in charges pertaining to the construction phase service. Kanyari, yung construction period, nadagdagan ng 50%, then dapat yung fee ng architect pertaining to the construction phase, dagdagan din ng, di ko alam kung sinabi ko, 50%, about 50% of ilan man. I-adjust proportionately. That's what we're requesting. Okay? When the suspension of the construction exceeds a period of 6 months, the fee for the remaining works must be doubled. So, kapag more than 6 months yung suspension, dapat yung remaining works, yung fee for the remaining works, which is full-time supervision dapat doblehin. Dapat doblehin na raw. Again, kasi kawawa si architect, medyo lugi siya yung sa weekly site visits niya. Na parang, hindi naman niya in-expect na aabutin ng ganyang katagal. Kasi ang usapan, dapat in less than a year tapos yung construction. Pero ito, mag-3 years na, hindi pa tapos. So parang ganun. Kawawa din naman siya. That's why may clauses on how to parang increase yung fee for construction, periodic site supervision. Okay. Again, if the owner wishes to hire specialist consultants, pwede naman, pero separate payment, hindi in charge to the architect. Should the owner require the architect to design movable or fixed pieces of cabinets and other architectural elements, architectural interior elements, SPP components, urban design elements, again, babayaran ng additional kasi hindi naman to part ng regular design service. Now, we're about to look at SPP 203 after this, but most of these things are part of SPP 203, so separate payment dapat yun. Okay, full-time supervision. Upon recommendation of the architect and with the approval of the owner, full-time construction supervisors are deemed, as would be deemed necessary, are engaged and paid for by the owner. Okay? So, si owner ang magka-hire, magbabayad, pero si architect ang magre-recommend and magpapa-approve. Okay? Kung walang CM, then the full-time supervisor shall be under the technical control of the architect and shall make periodic reports to the owner. Okay, estimates in the regular design service, dapat may disclaimer yung estimates na hindi yan pangako. Now, we're not guaranteeing the estimate. It can only attain a certain degree of accuracy. And since we have no real control over the cost of labor and materials, there should be no professional responsibility for the estimates. Okay, wala tayong ginaguarantee na estimate. We're not saying na hindi siya lalagpas. It's just an estimate. Okay, taxes and services. The fee that we quote is a net amount, meaning after taxes. When you write in your proposal, fee of 300,000, yung 300K na yan is dapat, what do you call this? Dapat after the taxes have been deducted, dapat 300K yung matira. Dapat yung 3K malinis na makukuha mo from the client. Hindi pwedeng may 3K pero binawasan pa ng VAT, binawasan pa ng ganitong tax and that tax. That tax na yun dapat deducted na and dapat 3K yung matira. Okay? Ownership of documents, I won't read it. It's the same section 33. Again, ito yung part ng Architecture Act saying we own the documents we produce and they cannot be reproduced without agreement or permission from the architect. Okay, cost records. This one naman is about kapag nag-regular design service ka kasi, the most likely compensation method that you'll use is percentage of project construction cost. So your fee is a percentage of the construction cost. For you to be able to monitor how much your fee needs to be, dapat nakikita mo yung running construction cost. And doon naman papasok yung cost records. Nakalagay dito, the owner must be transparent about cost records. The owner must furnish the architect a copy of the records of expenses. Upon completion, the owner will furnish the architect a copy of the summary of all labor and services and materials and equipment used for the construction. The idea will be dapat may means si architect to confirm kung tama ba yung nakukuha niya ang clear na. Kasi, I mean, obviously, kailangan transparency owner about the construction cost because the fee of the architect depends on the cost. Okay? So, yun. Next, signs, ito general lang. Lahat ng mga gen con, sub-con, yung mga sign nila sa building, sa job site, dapat ipa-approve the architect. How about yung permanent signages in building? Okay, after completion of the project, the owner or his building lessee must consult the architect for the design and size of billboards, letterings, etc. that will be placed on the exterior or the public areas. So hindi naman like final call the architect, but the architect must be consulted. Nothing should be installed or inside or outside of the building that would compromise the safety and aesthetics of the building. Okay, just to quickly reiterate, when we say project construction cost, we mean the cost of the building. Okay, ang short version ko nito is cost of labor and materials. Now, cost of labor and materials yung PCC, MEP of systems, elements attached to the building, all of those things kasama sa PCC. Actually, PCC is easier not to understand kapag pinag-usapan yung PBC, pero nakalagay doon, the construction cost of other items planned and designed by the architect like the AI and site development plan elements are also part of the PCC. Pero yeah, ang bottom line for me, PCC is labor and materials, cost of labor and materials. Hindi kasama sa PCC yung cost ng lot, hindi kasama yung cost ng consultants, hindi kasama yung iba pang similar costs like that. So, yeah. The cost of materials used and the labor for their installation are part of the PCC. If these items are furnished by the owner below the market cost, dapat i-compute pa rin sila on the basis of the current market cost. Ang ibig lang sabihin nun is, kung kunyari may discounts na nakukuha si client from the suppliers kasi dami niyang kaibigan. So, mura nakukuha yung tile, yung yero, yung CHP. In other words, bababa yung PCC kasi daming discounts eh. Ang problem kasi with that naman is, the architect's fee depends on the PCC. It's a percentage of the PCC. So pag lumiliit yung PCC, lumiliit yung fee ni architect. Kaya lumiliit yung fee ni architect. And ang problem doon is, hindi naman naging mas madali yung trabaho ng architect just because naging mura yung yero or CHP. Diba? The job is the same. So why should the architect be paid less? Diba? Why should the architect be paid less? That's why, kapag may mga discounted material, discounted labor na nakukuha si owner, as far as the architect is concerned, they should be computed on the basis of fair market value. Ano ba yung fair market value ng CHP, ng yero, etc. Para naman fair yung makukuha ang fee ni architect. That's all we're saying here. Okay. Also, the PCC might be easier to understand if we tell you kung ano yung mga hindi kasama sa PCC. Hindi kasama sa PCC yung consultants' fees, yung cost ng lote, yung cost ng construction inspectors kasi we treat that as parang consultants' fees. If you want to include those things, lahat ng gastos, including magkano yung lote, magkano yung permits, magkano yung professional fees, then you can do that, combine everything. The amount though is called the project development cost. Now again, it includes the cost of the construction, PCC plus professional fees, permits, clearances, utilities, cost of acquiring the site, cost of money, inflation, all of that. So yung PDC is parang magkano suma total, magkano yung nagastos ng kliyente. That's the PDC. Why do we have to make this distinction? Kasi pumuporsyento tayo sa construction cost, sa project cost, doon tayo sa PCC pumuporsyento, hindi sa PDC. Again, doon tayo sa PCC. Our fee is a percentage of the PCC and not the PDC. Okay, new document, new service. This time, this is about the specialized architectural service or specialized architectural services. So introduction, I think konting justification why we have these services. So sabi dito, time and technology have evolved to a level where specialized services are needed to complete, complement, or supplement some projects. Apart from the legal definition of the word architecture in RA 1966, we can also define architecture as the proper blending of aesthetics, function, space, materials, and the environment. Okay? And specialized architectural services deal with specific expertise for the further enhancement of the architectural interior and exterior components of a project. if I were to put it in my own words, if I were to put it more simply, I'd say that specialized architectural services are additional services that may be needed by some projects. Now, not all projects need yung mga ganito. Not all projects need an acoustic designer. Not all projects need a lighting specialist. Okay, but some projects do. And for projects that do need yung mga ganyang additional specialist services, then we're just saying architects can do some of them. Okay, so how many specialized services, specialized architectural services do we have? We have 23. This is the longest list of any module. We'll just go through the list so you understand what each service is about. Pero quick clarification, the architectural plan and design of the building is part of the regular design service. Yung designing the building, that's part of the regular design service. No? Hindi kasali yan sa specialized architectural services. Now, parang think of the specialized architectural services as the optional add-ons dun sa regular design service. And not all buildings require these add-ons. Okay? Now, before we start with the first one, I'll also mention these services used to be called specialized allied services. Back in 1979, they were called specialized allied services. If you look at UAP document 203, specialized allied in nakalagay, we don't use that term anymore because the term now is specialized architectural services. Okay, and again, we have a list of 23 services. Okay, it's a bit overwhelming, I think, but most of these madali namang ma-identify. Like, the moment it's described to you, you know right away what it is. Okay? Bihira yung medyo nakakalito. Most of these madali, like, instantly alam mo agad, AI, architectural interiors. So the first one of 23 is architectural interiors. Architectural interiors, before we start pala din dito. So sabi ko, these are parang, think of this as add-ons, no add-ons. Not all buildings require this. And also, not all architects can do this. Okay, itong 23 services na to, a lot of them require specialists. Okay, you have to have these skills to be able to offer these services. You can't just parang go around claiming you're an acoustic consultant. Okay, dapat alam mo talaga. Okay, the idea kasi is, some architects can do this, and therefore it's a valid architectural service. It's a specialized service, but some architects specialize in interiors. Some architects specialize in acoustics, and so we can allow them to specialize. Okay, so bottom line, hindi required for all buildings, and hindi lahat ng architect kaya gawin itong mga to. Okay, so also all of these hindi part ng regular design service. I hope that's clear. I think that's like obvious, but I'm just reiterating. Hindi ito part ng regular design. Pag pinagawa sa ito ng kliyente mo, you have to tell them this is not part of the regular design service. You can look through the contract, hindi ito part. So if you want me to do it, you'll have to pay me separately. Okay. So anyway, let's begin. We have 23 items to go through. The first one is architectural interiors. This involves the detailed planning and design of the indoor areas of the building, including retrofitting, renovation, rehabilitation, or expansion work, and the laying out of the building engineering system. So, planning, designing the interiors of the building. That's what this service is. In this service, you're expected to prescribe space plans, stacking diagrams. You're expected to compute areas inside. You're expected to lay out furniture, prescribe furniture, pipili ka ng furniture, design built-in components like cabinets, equipment. Ikaw ang gagawa ng specs for interiors like floor finishes, wall finishes, ceiling finishes, doors and windows and hardware and all of the things that affect the interiors of the project. This is your job in this service. The rest are standard. You help the client with bidding. You check the material samples, ikaw mag-check ng billings, ikaw mag-inspect ng trabaho. These are all standard. Okay, so that's architectural interiors. The second specialized service is acoustic design services. Some architects can do this. This service involves the detailed planning and design to control sound transmission for compatibility with the architectural design concept. That's acoustic design services. So if you happen to know this, then go ahead, offer this service. So in this service, ikaw ang gagawa ng drawings and specs for acoustic design and treatment, sound control and reinforcement, sound absorption, reflectance, etc. The list is standard. You help with bidding, you help with checking of samples of materials, ikaw mag-inspect ng work, ikaw yung mag-evaluate ng billings. Also pretty easy, lighting, layout, and design. I mean, easy to identify. Pag binigay sa exam, you know right away this is that service. You do the detailed planning and design of light transmission, timing, and control. Ikaw ang gagawa ng drawings and specs for lighting design, illumination, fixture placement, efficiency calculations, energy considerations. You help with bidding, materials, inspecting the work, and billings. Now, I will make a quick comment. Meron basic lighting design that is part of the regular design service. Okay? Yung, kunyari, simpleng ilaw lang ng bahay. Kasama yun sa regular design service. Hindi mo yung sasabihin na separate service yun, separate bayad. No. A separate service na lighting is for complex lighting projects that clearly require a lighting specialist. Think complicated lighting installations or lighting installations na, I don't know, namamatay, nabubuhay or kailangan sumasabay sa music or, I don't know, things like that. Okay, yung talagang hindi na normal, hindi na parang part ng regular design, hindi na siya parang pang general lighting lang. Okay? Kapag gano'n, kailangan nyo na kumuha ng lighting specialist. Hindi na yun kasi regular design. Ito yung pinag-usapan natin dito. Ang sinasabi lang natin dito is, some architects may specialize in lighting design. In fact, I know someone from my batch in college who actually went down this route. Ito yung naging specialization niya. And so, lighting consultant siya. So, architect siya and lighting consultant at the same time. So, we're just saying some architects can do this. Not all, but some. And hindi ito yung normal na RCP lang. Yung normal na RCP lang na may ilaw-ilaw na may standard spacing. Kasama yan sa regular design. Okay, next service. Number 4, site development planning. In this service, ikaw yung gagawa ng space plan, layout, utilization ng building surroundings. Okay, ng site dev, kumbaga. No? Yung spaces within and surrounding the building. Ang sinasabi dito, yung interiors daw ng building and yung exteriors dapat daw well-coordinated para maganda. So, hindi lang yung building yung importante, it's also the surroundings. No? And as architects, we don't just care about the building, but we care about the grounds as well. So, we have to ensure na maganda yung layout ng labas. In this service, parang landscaping siya. In this service, you're doing complex site development planning. Nakalagay dito. Normally, ordinarily, yung landscaping layout ng maliliit na building projects, kasama na yan ng site dev sa regular design service. And that's true. Kasama sa regular design service yung mga space around the house, lalagyan mo yan ng konting design, no? Basic landscaping. Pero, sometimes, the landscaping becomes too difficult and requires someone a specialist in landscaping. Okay? Nakalagay, if the project is large enough in scale, then another professional, a specialist consultant for landscaping must be hired for the job. Imagine a really complex garden. Na parang, that should not, parang normally sa regular design, it shouldn't be that detailed. No? Yung parang, it's kind of beyond your knowledge because ibang level na garden yung pinapagawa sa'yo. Imagine na mas mahirap pa i-design yung garden than the house. That's how you kind of know na kailangan na ng specialist eh. Kasi you were hired to design the house. Parang incidental lang yung surroundings dapat eh. Pero kapag mas mahirap na i-design yung labas kaysa sa building, then ibang level na yung trabaho na yan, you probably need a specialist consultant. And if you're thinking, shouldn't we hire landscape architects for this? You could do that. Yeah, you could hire landscape architect for it. We're just saying, some architects can do site development planning as well. No, hindi lang landscape architects. Parang ganun. It sounds a bit, I don't know if you're noticing this, pero if the interior designers have any issue with us, it would probably be because of the architectural interiors kanina. And if the landscape architects have a bit of an issue with us, it's probably because of this service. We're not calling it landscape architecture, we're calling it site development planning. Okay, we're calling it site development planning. But ano bang difference? Well, see for yourself. Ang sabi sa site dev planning, ikaw daw ang gagawa ng site dev plan, ikaw ang gagawa ng scope of civil works, scope of softscape and hardscape, ikaw ang mag-specify ng civil works and utility lines, You help with bidding for landscaping, waterscape, rock formations, etc. I'll be frank, a lot of these things kasi talaga medyo ginagawa din ng landscape architects. So, if they are parang yun nga, if they think na parang medyo nakakagawa yung work nila because of this specialized architectural service that we're claiming to be our job, then I kind of understand it. Pero don't let those thoughts influence how you answer your questions in the exam. Sa exam, pag tinanong ka, is this a service that should be rendered by architects? Kung ang tawag sa service is site development planning, say yes. Kung ang tawag sa service is landscape architecture, say no. Same for architectural interiors. If they're calling it architectural interiors, yes. Pero ang tawag is interior design, say no. Okay, parang I would just treat it like that. But honestly, in my opinion, yeah, I can see a bit of an overlap at least. Okay, I mean, I won't concede. I'll be that honest, no, at least. Anyway, number 5, site and physical planning services. Let's define physical planning. Physical planning is the orderly arrangement within a piece of land on which vertical structures like buildings and monuments, as well as horizontal developments like rights of ways and open spaces, are to be proposed. So you have one piece of land, tatayuan ng multiple buildings or monuments and roads and open spaces. Kumbaga maraming ilalagay sa property. Hindi lang siya isang building. It's multiple things. Okay? Something like that is not very simple to plan. Okay? You need parang someone who knows ano ba yung tamang interface between buildings, ano ba yung tamang configuration kapag ganyan nakarami yung mga ilalagay. The service is physical planning. Hindi niya normal site development plan in the regular design service. So you need a physical planner. You need someone who can do the physical planning. So, konting kwento nakalagay planning, started with physical planning, the architects are taking the lead role. The great cities of the world were achieved through the visionary architects and who engage in physical planning. As architects, we don't just care about the building, but with the surroundings of the building as well. So we study how the building interrelates with the other buildings, the environment, etc. So physical planning is about when there are multiple buildings or structures or open spaces or other elements within one property. If the architect is commissioned to do a physical plan, he has to go beyond studying human behavior. He must undertake an in-depth study of economic systems, laws and regulations, tax structure, infrastructure, utilities, and other components. Okay? And all of these ideas and concepts have to be translated now into a physical plan that can then be implemented. So, to be more specific, I'll go now to the slide that explains physical planning. Physical planning is concerned with the general quality of the settings for people and their activities. In this service, the architect will undertake the site planning of a project that requires a composite arrangement of several buildings and structures. So, again, ibang level ng planning skills yung kailangan kapag ganun na kadaming buildings yung ilalagay within one big property. Physical planning na yun. Sometimes the physical planning service is rendered not just by one person but by multiple people, and that's fine. Sometimes you have to hire people down to do feasibility studies, market analysis, ganyan. Okay lang. Pero ang sabi ng standards natin, ideally, an architect would be the lead professional in the physical planning team. Okay? And again, kung architect ang kukuhanin, the architect may recommend the hiring of additional specialists to be paid for separately by the client. Lastly, what kinds of projects ba yung pinag-uusapan natin? Like when we say, one property, multiple buildings, medyo mahirap i-plan, dapat maganda yung pagkakaplano, so kailangan physical planner ang kuhanin. What kinds of projects are we talking about? Yeah, so we got examples, industrial parks or industrial estates, commercial center, institutional center, civic center, sports complex, tourist centers, resorts, amusement parks, educational facilities, so malaking campus, for example, even subdivisions. Okay, it takes a considerable amount of planning skill to be able to do these things correctly. Okay, and if you can do it, I mean, if you're confident enough, if you think you can do it, then you can render the service. We call it site and physical plan. So in this service, you meet with the client to understand their requirements. You get primary and secondary data to be used for your physical plan. You study the laws, ordinances, rules, and regulations that affect the project. You prepare the master development plan. You present the same, or you present the master development plan to the client, sometimes to the government if needed, sometimes to in public consultations. You prepare the SPPCC statement of probable project construction cost, gagawa ng final plans after the consultations for approval with the government agencies. Sometimes gagawa ka rin ng phasing of construction, project cost estimates, okay? Hindi nila masyadong explain ang difference ito dun sa SPPCC, but bottom line is cost estimates of the project. So that's physical planning. Okay. Now, an expanded version of that is the next one, comprehensive development planning. Parehong planning, pero this is parang broader in scope, bigger in scope in comprehensive. So comprehensive development planning services are based on the concept of expanded physical planning services. So expand natin yung physical planning to include the non-physical components. Okay. Nakalagay, and expand to include other activities necessary for the proper handling of the numerous components considered in the creation of the master development plan. Okay, the planning team is typically multidisciplinary, but comprehensive development planning may place a heavy emphasis now on the non-physical components of the plan, the non-engineering components of the plan. Example, CDP services, comprehensive development planning services, may emphasize the financial aspect, economic aspect, market demands, admin, political, institutional, legal aspects, socio-cultural, environmental aspects, all of these, non-physical yet. Okay? An architect who is also an environmental planner is particularly qualified for this service. Okay, this is, I think, the first time that they mentioned you are environmental planner. An architect is probably qualified for the service if he is also an environmental planner. Okay, because he would have the suitable training and experience and the commitment to lead the planning team. Scope of services, so gagawa daw in the service, kasama yung data gathering, preparation ng environmental impact assessment, formulation of the comprehensive development plan with the following components. As you can see, hindi lang physical, kasi kung physical lang, ibig sabihin physical planning lang yun, that was yung kanina. Kapag comprehensive, it's more than just the physical. May economic component yung plan, may socio-cultural component, transport component, and legal and administrative component. Okay? Dinify pa nila ano yung ibig sabihin ng each component. I wouldn't really personally bother with this too much. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. But in scope of service, so you're expected to be able to identify existing land uses, resources, social behavior, and interaction. You must be able to perform environmental analysis, gagawa ka ng environmental impact assessment. You must be able to do demographic analysis and feasibility studies. Of course, it goes without saying, you must be able to study laws and ordinances. Gagawa ka ng conceptual development plans. So yeah, that's comprehensive development planning. Okay, the rest are pretty straightforward. Ito super bilis na lang kasi sometimes you just read the title and you get it there. It's understandable na eh. Pero sige, isa-isahin natin. The next service is historic and it's heritage conservation and planning. So obvious naman from the name, no, heritage conservation. Basically, consultant ka for heritage conservation. So nakalagay dito, you're expected to provide research assistance, assessment, recording, management, interpretation, and conservation of historical heritage. The next service is security evaluation and planning. In this service, you're expected to perform evaluation of security. I-evaluate mo kung gaano ka-secure yung existing facility or i-evaluate mo paano isi-secure yung facility. So, you're expected to arrange and formulate methods of rating and ascertaining the value of structures. You're expected to know how to provide sufficient safeguards for the project. So, we expect you to know paano yung dapat set up ng CCTV cameras, mga ganyan, saan dapat nakatutok yung camera. I would expect na kasama yan sa service yan. Paano yung ways to secure the project. Okay, ano yung how many layers, how many gates, ano dapat yung operational setup nila para make sure na safe and secure yung project. Next, building systems design. If you're hired here, you're basically a consultant giving advice on how to produce building components in a highly engineered, highly efficient, and highly cost-effective manner. This is particularly important for residential and commercial projects. Okay, magaling ka dapat sa prefab, magaling ka trying to find ways to speed up the process and to simplify the process of construction. Next, service facilities maintenance support. Again, this is mostly a consultancy service. So you're a consultant helping the client figure out means and measures to ensure the proper function and maintenance of the building and the site after final inspection. So we would expect you to be very knowledgeable about maintenance, be very knowledgeable about warranty periods, warranty ng mga contractor, be very knowledgeable about preventive maintenance ng equipment, be very knowledgeable about possible defects, ano yung mga bad practices, etc., ano yung good practices. Okay? Facilities maintenance support. Next, building testing and commissioning. Again, from the name, it's kind of easy to figure out what this is about. So dito, consultant ka for testing and commissioning. So we expect you to be able to recommend a good way, a good method of testing and commissioning the building. You're going to recommend a systematic process of ensuring that the building's array of systems are planned, designed, installed, and tested to perform according to the design intent. So magaling ka sa testing and commissioning, you're going to recommend methods of testing. Like kunyari, waterproofing, alam mo kung paano i-test, alam mo yung tamang testing ng pipes, how to find kung ano yung, kasi mga flow test, mga ganyan, mga ganun test ba? No, dapat familiar ka sa ganun. How to test equipment, how to run them, how to ensure na they're working properly. No? Kasi that requires testing. So, this is mostly a consulting job. Okay, consultant job. You're not going to test them yourself, not necessarily. You're just going to parang recommend a system, a manner of testing and commissioning. And hinire ka because gusto ni owner siguro ng peace of mind, gusto niya makasigurado na tested and commissioned properly in building. Because if they're not tested properly, if they're not installed properly, hindi makukuha yung benefits of high performance designs. This is especially true for very expensive energy-saving equipment. Maraming energy-saving equipment na mahal-mahal bilhin. And you want to be sure na tama yung pagkakakabit kasi mahal ng bili mo, tas mali naman pala yung pagkakakabit so hindi ka rin nakakasave ng energy. Diba? Why did you pay so much more money? Diba? Anyway, next, building environment certification. Building environment certification, think LEED, okay, LEED or verde, mga ganyan. In this service, the consulting architect must have more than the basic knowledge of green architecture and environmental and sustainable design. Magaling ka daw dapat dyan. Dapat magaling ka sa environmental laws like the Philippine Solid Waste Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and DNR administrative issuances. Yung mga issuance ng DNR about sa mga SPP, mga ganyan. Sumegway ng konti ang SPP into this discussion. So, bottom line, in this service, you are a consultant for building environment certification. Kunyari nga, magaling ka sa LEED, okay, and you're trying to earn LEED points. They're going to hire you as a consultant to give advice on how to get the LEED certification that they want. Now, that's a sample scenario for this service. Pero speaking of LEED, may ganitong side discussion dito sa SPP. Ang sabi ng SPP, we need a building environment rating system. Okay, because a building environment rating system like LEED or Verde, for example, encourages the market to migrate towards sustainable design. Wala siyang sinabi kung anong system yung dapat natin gamitin. Pero ang sabi lang ng SPP, the rating system we eventually will use must be credit-based, must be flexible, and must be market-driven for it to succeed. Okay? Pero yun, side discussion lang yan. Let's now go to forensic architecture, the 13th service, forensic architecture. One of the more interesting sounding services. In this service, you're hired to do a scientific study about the built environment, about the building's well-being, focusing on the ways in which the building can best maintain itself and prolong its life in a cost-efficient manner. So, para kang doktor na kinuha to parang do a check-up of the building, and you're going to make recommendations to the client on how to prolong the life of the building. So, you tell the client na ito, mukhang ano na to, dapat ayusin nyo na yan bago lumala. Okay? Normally, yung ganyan, mabilis masira yan. So, dapat binabantayan nyo. I would suggest habaan niyo yung warranty ng ganyan kasi nagiging sakit sa ulo yan later on. Things like that. Okay? So, that's one part of forensic architecture. But the forensic architecture service or the forensic study could also include diagnosing problems. So, hindi pwedeng may problem na yung building that you're on board because you're asking you naman to try to figure out bakit nagkakaganon yung building. May problema na and you're just trying to, they're hiring you to identify the root cause, kumbaga. Okay, so your forensic study could include determining the cause of deterioration, determining the cause of deficiencies, researching whatever faulty activities and operations were done during the implementation phase. Like, may mali bang ginawa yung contractor, bakit ba nagka-crack yung mga yan ngayon? Determining faulty design or construction methodology. So this service is called forensic architecture. The 14th specialized service is building appraisal. Okay, first of all, appraisal is the act of estimating value. Like, an appraiser is someone who places value on things. Like, you show him your phone, you show him, I don't know, alahas, your property. By examining the thing, he'll be able to tell you magkano yung parang selling price dapat ng item. A building appraiser, therefore, is someone who places value on buildings. Like someone that you consult, kunyari, you're trying to sell your house and you have no idea how much. You can get an appraiser. Pa-appraise mo, pupuntahan niya yung house, and sabihin niya sa'yo, pwede mo ito ibenta ng 4M, pwede mo ibenta ng 10M, binibigyan. So, in other words, to be able to render the service, you must be able to place value on the building condition and defects. You must also be able to place value on repair and maintenance and required improvements. You should be the type of person who can say, yeah, kaya mo ibenta ng 5 million yung bahay mo, but if you repaint the labas, if you repaint the exterior, you'd have to spend 500K lang, and then you could add 2 million to the selling price. Now, things like that, something like that in building appraisal. The next service is structural conceptualization. Okay, structural conceptualization, relate to structural design. Structural conceptualization in tawag. Conceptualization is not design. No, in conceptualization, you conceive, you choose, and you develop the type of the structure, the disposition of the structural elements, the arrangement of the structural elements, considering safety, cost effectiveness, functionality, and aesthetics. Now again, don't get this wrong. Hindi ito structural design. This is just structural conceptualization because we do not do structural design. Okay, so this service would be very conceptual lang. No, you'd be conceptualizing. Like, imagine mo, ito gusto ko cantilever. No, siguro, we're going to use a steel frame for the building. Mga ganyan. And we're going to do pre-stressed slab. We're going to use tendons, ganyan-ganyan, para wala ng beams, para flat slab. So you're just choosing the type of structure, disposition of structure, maybe a bit of the arrangement, but you're not actually designing it. Okay, pwede kang kuhanin consultant for this. Kung kaya mo yan, like magaling ka dyan. 16 is preliminary services. If you're an expert in site analysis, space planning and management, architectural programming, and other services that were mentioned in SPP 201, pwede kang kuhanin consulting architect for preliminary services. Again, basically just a consultant for those studies that need to be performed for the project. Number 17 is contract documentation and review. Contract documentation, ikaw yung gagawa ng contract documents. Okay? Contract document review is ikaw yung taga-review ng contract documents. So they're kind of related but they're different. Pero bottom line is, parang ina-outsource sa'yo yung contract documentation. And this is very common eh. Madaming ganito eh. Like, ganito yung racket ng maraming architect para sa kanila ina-outsource yung CAD work. Anyway, for this service, you're expected to very good at specs writing kasi gagawa ka ng contract documents and it's part of the contract documents. Specs writing, estimation, QS, architectural production, I'd say, is the most important. Okay, architectural production. Magaling ka dapat sa CAD and other architectural software. Architectural support kasi parang in-outsource na sa'yo yung trabaho, yung contract documentation. So, parang support team ka, kumbaga. And contract document review. Dapat nare-review mo ng mga yung drawings bago ito blueprint. Diba? So, yun. This is that service. Contract documentation and review. post-design services. Okay, you're a consultant for the construction, the pre-construction, and the post-construction phase. Okay, we'll discuss those next time. Pero basically, consultant ka for not for the design phase, but for the pre-construction, construction, and post-construction phase. Okay, kasama doon sa service na to yung paggawa ng FALAR. Okay, FALAR, which are now called FSCR, FSCCR, and FSMR in the new fire code IRR. Pero kasama sa ganitong service yung paggawa ng mga ganyang report. Okay, we have dispute avoidance and resolution. What kind of service is this? Dispute avoidance and resolution. May nag-aaway kunyari si client at si contractor. And, or may nag-aaway yung client or whatever. An architect who is an expert in dispute avoidance and resolution could be hired to help the client parang deal with the dispute. Now, the architect in this area of practice, dapat gamay daw niya yung ADR Act, yung RA 9285 or the Alternative Dispute Resolution Act of 2004. Dapat gamay niya yung mga construction arbitration processes, mediation, conciliation, negotiation, contract administration, expert testimony, appraisal, adjustments, all of these things. Okay? Kasi sometimes the client would be parang kabado na magkakaroon ng arbitration, ganyan-ganyan. Yung abogado hindi naman magaling or hindi naman masyadong alam yung construction. Pwede kumuha ng architect na magaling sa arbitration tapos, I don't know, siya yung kumbaga consultant ng kliyente or pwede rin siya yung maging arbitrator talaga. Okay? Kasama yun sa services that we can render. Let's just quickly also define some of these terms kasi madalas din na ma-mention. Arbitration is a voluntary dispute resolution process in which one or more arbitrators appointed in accordance with the agreement of the parties resolve a dispute by rendering an award. Ito dalawang nag-aaway. Okay? Pag sinabing mag-arbitration sila, ibig sabihin, hindi sila magsasampahan ng kaso sa korte. Magta-try muna silang mag-resolve ng dispute. They'll try to resolve the dispute using an alternative method. And one method is arbitration. The way that this works is, mag-a-appoint ng arbitrators yung dalawang nag-aaway, and the arbitrators will listen to both sides presumably and then issue a decision. Sino tama, sino mali. Okay, that's arbitration. Okay? Iba yan sa mediation. Kasi mediation is a voluntary process in which a mediator facilitates communication and negotiation and assists the parties in reaching a voluntary agreement regarding a dispute. Ang mediator naman, hindi siya nag-render ng judgment. No? Kasi arbitrator parang judge sila eh. Parang at the end of the process, meron silang sasabihin sino ang tama. Ang mediator hindi gano'n. Ang mediator parang nagpa-facilitate lang ng pag-uusap between the two disputing parties. At ang goal ng mediator is to get them to agree to a voluntary agreement, not to settle. Parang ganyan. Conciliation is a type of mediation. Okay, it's a subtype of mediation. It's an alternative dispute resolution process where a conciliator meets with the parties separately and together to resolve their differences and to reach a compromise. Okay, so yun, parang a compromise agreement. Yun yung goal ng conciliation. It's very similar to mediation. In fact, it's hard to tell what the difference is, pero I'd say focus maybe on the keywords na lang. Now, the keyword I'd say here is conciliator, compromise, and besides, this is a type of mediation now, in conciliation. Yeah, the term mediation includes conciliation. Conciliation is often used when the parties are in need of restoring or repairing a relationship, either personal or business relationships. Okay, we have four remaining specialized architectural services. The next one is architectural research methods. In this service, you're hired to do research. Okay, so dapat magaling ka sa research methods. And common research topics like Philippine architecture and history, architectural materials and finishes, building types and standards, architectural design trends, architectural writing, and architectural photography. Number 21, special building design. I'll simplify that to special building design. This is for architects na nag-specialize in one particular type of building type. Okay, like parang 10 years puro hospital na. Pwede ka nang mag-claim na, yun nga, you specialize in that building type. So you can do special building design. So here, you're hired as a consultant, not necessarily architect of record, but as a consultant for specific building types. And presumably, you specialize kasi in that kind of building, and you may be able to give parang good comments, useful feedback to the client, because you're an expert in that kind of building. So ano yung tipo ng building kung saan nagsispecialize yung mga tao. A lot of times you have specialists, no, who specialize in housing developments, tourism estates, healthcare, hospitality. Pag sinabing hospitality, mga hotel, transportation and telecommunications, yung mga nagsispecialize in production facilities, utility developments, industrial parks and secure facilities, and even economic zones. So if you are an expert in any of these, you could be hired as a consultant for these items. 22, building components. Sometimes we need consultants for specific building components, especially for projects where these components are complex. Sometimes, well, first of all, kung magiging consultant ka for building components, we expect you to have a very broad knowledge. You have very broad knowledge in building materials, building finishes, construction methods, building envelopes like cladding and roofing systems, magaling ka sa windows, architectural fenestrations, architectural hardware, fixtures, and fittings. So, yan yung parang building component service. Consultant ka for one of these things. No? In my experience, ang madalas na may dedicated consultant is windows, no, glass, facade, cladding, mga ganyan. Madalas may dedicated consultant na bukod pa sa architect of record. Usually may dedicated consultant, especially for high-rise, regarding the facade and glass, especially big glass. And finally, the last specialized architectural service is the management of architectural practices. So here you're hired to be a consultant in managing an architectural office. So we expect you to be good at different types of architectural office operations, architectural office management. You should be good in accounting, finance, taxation, and audit. Magaling ka raw sa labor code. Magaling ka sa architectural marketing and project development. Magaling ka sa proposals, negotiations, and contracts, and limitations sa mga BPO, KPO. Some offices, especially large ones, may need help in managing the office, especially if they feel like the setup is no longer working. Kaya you're a big architectural firm, like more than 100 people, and you feel like hindi na, for some reason, the setup is not very efficient, you could hire someone who knows all of these things to take a look and to give you advice. Tapos the advice would probably be something along the lines of, the office in a department for production. The production team should be separate from the design team. Mga ganyan ba? Okay, so a consultant could be hired for this kind of consultancy work. Kasi consultancy pa rin yan. Okay, that's the end. So we're now going to discuss SPP 204, which is actually split into two separate documents, no? 204A and 204B. Both of these documents cover services rendered by architects during the construction phase of the project, but these are two different services. Okay, the first one, A, covers the full-time supervision service, while the other one, B, covers the construction management service. There is a difference between the two. Okay, so we're just going to start with 204A now, the one that's about full-time supervision. Okay, so let's begin. So it begins with this rationale. Now it explains sino yung characters in the construction story. Okay, so nandyan daw si owner, of course, who is the one who asked for the building to be constructed, who pays for everything. The second character are the consultants. No? They provide the design services, limited inspection work. And then you have, of course, the contractor, the one who's actually building or constructing the building. And then finally, you have those people. Now, the person or the persons who supervise the work, who do the full-time inspection. Okay, so where this service, full-time supervision, is obviously about the fourth character. Okay, the persons who assist in the supervision of the work. Okay, now, recap. What do we know about this? Building codes, having a building code, dapat merong full-time supervisor yung job site, yung construction. Kaya that person must either be an architect or an engineer. No, I think civil engineer or architect. Sabi natin, kapag architect yung kinuha, ang tawag sa architect na yun is the AICC, Architect in Charge of Construction. Okay? And then may konting backstory pa. Back then daw, in the past, when projects were still manageable, na medyo maliliit lang, the architect of record was assisted by a construction inspector, traditionally called the clerk of works. Now, there's one person on site, inspector siya, and ang trabaho niya is to inspect. Ang tawag sa kanya, clerk of works, siya yung nag-report kay architect of record. But now, projects are much more complex, and it's usually not enough to have just one person do the job of inspection. It's usually a group of people, a group of inspectors doing this inspection on site. No, it normally different trades yan. One trade, one inspector, meaning may inspector ka for civil works and structural works and architectural works. Minsan magkahiwalay pa yung architectural sa civil and structural. And then you have the people doing the MEPF, electrical, mechanical, etc. So, bottom line, projects are now so complex that it's usually not enough to have just one person doing this job. It's usually a group of people doing the job. But whether it's just one person or a group of persons, they're still doing the same job, which is full-time supervision of the construction. Okay. Now, if it's a group of people, now we refer to the group as the CSG or the Construction Supervision Group. Normally, it would be the architect who will recommend to the owner kung sino dapat yung CSG, if it should be a group or just one person. And kung CSG siya or one person really, sino ba yung dapat i-hire? Basically, the architect makes a recommendation to the owner. Okay? And the CSG or the inspectors answer both to the owner and the architect of record. Ano trabaho ng inspector? When I say inspector, when we talk about the person here, we're talking about it could be an AICC na isang tao lang for a smaller project, or for a large project, it could be a CSG, Construction Supervision Group. It's kind of the same thing. No? The job is kind of the same thing. Trabaho nila yung quality control. Sometimes in real life, tawag yan QA/QC, quality assurance and quality control. Evaluation of the work. Okay. Preparation of inspection reports and filing of documents. So they inspect. The inspection is to ensure quality. And of course, kapag nag-inspect, dapat may reports. They also evaluate yung construction, kung get sa billings, etc. And yeah, lots of document keeping, document filing. How is the service provided? You could be the architect of record, and then you could also be the AICC if you want. No one's going to stop you from doing that. It's not a very common arrangement, but technically you could do this if you want to. Ikaw na yung nag-design, ikaw pa yung gagawing full-time supervisor. Okay? This is not, hindi naman ito bawal. In fact, ang nakalagay pa nga, if anything, the architect of record is in a great position to become the inspector, because if anyone knows the plans, it's him. So he's going to be able to interpret the plans the best, no, and to check kung compliant pa si contractor. Pero yeah, this is not very usual. Let's be honest. This is not the most common setup. Normally, the inspector, the full-time inspector or supervisor, is a third party. It's not the architect of record. It's either another architect or another group of people nga, CSG. Okay. We have to talk about the limitation of authority ng full-time supervisor. Okay. Again, in these slides, tawag CSG, pero I prefer to use the more general term full-time supervisor, because it could be one person or it could be a group of people. So anyway, the full-time supervisor, the CSG, shall not assume the responsibility for the contractor's superintendent. We have to keep in mind na yung full-time supervisor, hindi yan tao ng contractor, tao yan yung owner. Okay? Hindi yan superintendent ng contractor, hindi yan dapat inutusan ng contractor. And mas lalong hindi siya dapat parang ginagawang parang foreman or superintendent or PIC ng contractor. Hindi pwede siya yung sinisisi ng contractor kung ba't mali yung pinagawa, siya yung sinisisi ng contractor bakit na-delay trabaho. No. Okay, again, the CSG, the full-time supervisor, does not work as the superintendent of the contractor. The contractor must have his own superintendent, his own QAQC, his own PIC. Basically. Okay? So, hindi pwedeng sabihin na, mali yung ginawa ng mga trabahador ko kasi hindi in-inspect ng CSG yung bakal bago buksan. Okay? With or without the full-time supervisor, dapat tama yung gawa ng contractor. The CSG is not there to ensure na tama yung gagawin ng contractor. The CSG is there kasi kailangan may mata si owner sa site. No? So parang eyes of the owner siya, si CSG. Pero with or without the CSG, the contractor should get it right. Next, another limitation of authority. The CSG should not decide on matters that are the responsibility of the architect of record. Again, this is obvious. There are things that should be referred to the consultants, and the CSG obviously is not in the position to be deciding on those things. Design issues mostly. Okay, hindi pwedeng yung CSG ang nag-decision. Legal responsibility. Okay, the CSG or the full-time supervisor reports to the owner for administrative matters, but for technical matters, the full-time supervisor or the CSG should report to the architect of record. Okay, ganito yung interpretation ng SPP natin about Article 1723. The question is this: meron bang civil liability ang full-time supervisor? I'll just give you their interpretation. I don't necessarily 100% agree with this interpretation, but I think that this is the interpretation that you should adopt when you're answering the exam because this is in the standards of practice. At sabi ng SPP natin, under Article 1723 of the Civil Code, the CSG or the full-time supervisor may appear not to have any legal responsibility kasi the designers answer for the design and the contractor daw answers for the constructions. Pag tinanong ka, what do you think? Do you think may civil liability ang CSG or a full-time supervisor under the Civil Code? My suggested answer is no. Why? Because nasa SPP yan. My honest answer, let's not go to my honest answer. It doesn't matter. Okay, kasi, I don't know, basahin niyo yung Article 1723, tell me what you think. Hindi yun to interpretation to personally. Pero hindi ko na kayo confuse. Basta sa exam, stick to this. This is in the standard. Okay? However, paano kapag sumabi, kunyari, nag-collapse yung building, so may civil liability, na-trace sa design, so may civil liability si designers or si architect of record. Pwede bang madama yung CSG? Ang nakalagay sa standards natin, kung nakalagay daw sa kontrata ng CSG or ng full-time supervisor na damay siya sa civil liability, then pwede siyang madamay. Particularly if kasama daw sa CSG sa review of contract documents. Like, chinek naman ni CSG yung contract documents, kasali siya, tapos nakalagay pa sa kontrata na madadami siya kapag ka nagka-civil liability yung consultant, then pwede siyang madamay. Okay, so that's what they're saying in the standards. Again, by default, walang civil liability, it appears na wala. Okay? Also, may karapatan yung consultants and yung contractor to cross-sue, to sue the CSG for acts traceable to the CSG. Sample, nag-collapse yung building during the first 15 years and na-trace na may mali sa structural plans. Okay? And then, so pinlame yung structural engineers, sinampahan ng kaso, and then ang defense ng structural engineer was, yes, may mali sa plano, but I was able to correct that. I was able to revise the plans. I gave it to the CSG, and the CSG said the issue niya sa contractor. Pero it turned out, hindi pala na-delay sa contractor yun daw eh. Okay, so, anong remedy, anong pwedeng gawin ng consultant, structural engineer? Kasi nasampahan siya ng kaso ng owner. Okay? Ang pwede niyang gawin is mag-file siya ng claim, ng sarili niyang kaso against the CSG. Because ang claim naman niya is, na-correct ko, pero hindi lang na-transmit ng CSG sa contractor. Parang I would imagine that that's what this is about. Okay? Who can become inspectors? Who can become a full-time supervisor? Who can become members of the CSG? Okay, the inspectors, the full-time supervisors, or the inspectors of the CSG must be architecture graduates, must have extensive experience in design and building construction, must be very knowledgeable though in materials and construction details, and that's the end of that. Okay, so that's the full-time supervision service. This is just one of two construction services. The other is SPP 204B. Alright, so let's talk about the construction management service. Still something that's rendered during the construction phase, parang full-time supervision, but this is a bit different. This is parang a step beyond supervision. Medyo mas maraming trabaho to. Okay? One thing rational is always, projects today are very complex. No? Clients are very demanding when it comes to cost control and faster implementation of the project. So clients want it to be done quickly and to be done within the budget. That's the reason for the construction management service, because the construction management service is intended to respond to this need. no, cost control, and faster implementation. Okay? The CM could either be tauhan ng owner, okay? Pwedeng third party, like third person. Pwede rin firm, third party firm. I would say in my experience, madalas yung CM is either a third party firm or in-house, a member of the staff of the owner. Okay, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. Um, Question: can architects become construction managers? Are we qualified to be construction managers? Pag tinanong ko sa exam, just say yes. Okay, obviously, the answer is yes. Something like that. The answer to that is obviously yes. But yes, it's in the standards. Architects can serve as CMs. No? Because architects now are trained in the coordination of the various specialties. So we are allowed, we're much more than qualified to supervise, to monitor construction activities, and to ensure quality workmanship and adherence to the budget. So we are definitely qualified to be CMs. In the real world, are architects hired as CMs? Sometimes. Okay? Side commentary na lang to, but I'm just being frank, no? In the real world, if you look at yung mga job street, mga ganyan, if you look at postings for CMs, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't really check this all the time, but I'm pretty sure most of the CM positions you'd find online require engineers. Sadly, the industry clearly prefers engineers. But again, in the exam, if they ask you, pwede ba architect? Obviously, yes, pwede. Okay. Ano ba trabaho ng CM? Okay, the responsibilities of the CM include the responsibilities of the CSG. So, kung ano yung sinabi natin trabaho ng inspector kanina, pasok yun sa trabaho ng CM. Okay? Including the following: coordination and supervision, cost and time control, quality control of the work, and record keeping. The one thing that's really important here na medyo bago, na hindi part ng full-time supervision kanina, is ito. Meron ng cost control, meron ng scheduling, na hindi masyadong focus ng full-time supervisor. Yung full-time supervisor is mostly just simple supervision, right? This is really project, I wouldn't say project management, but yeah, construction management. Now, you're not worried about the budget, you're not trying to check the schedule consistently, trying to find ways to meet the deadline and not go beyond the budget. So, obviously, the job is much more, it's your responsibilities are bigger here, okay, compared to kanina yung full-time supervision service. Okay? Now, yung CM, depende sa setup, pwede raw siya na yung magdala ng inspectors niya, or pwede naman na si owner mag-hire ng inspectors, mag-hire ng CM. Pero in any case, dapat yung inspectors, yung mga full-time inspectors kanina nag-report yan dapat sa CM, kung merong CM. Okay? Next, limitation ulit ng authority ng CM. Okay? There are things that the CM should not do. Okay? One, the CM should not involve himself directly with the work of the contractor such that it may be construed that he is assuming the contractor's liability in the civil code. Huwag siyang masyadong makialam, okay? Not directly at least. I mean, dapat sinusupervise niya, dapat ini-ensure niya na tama yung gawa. Pero yung sobrang siya na yung nagpagawa ng buhos, for example, siya na yung nagpapagawa ng bakal, or siya mismo, siya na yung nagbebenta ng mga bakal, etc. Kasi hindi niya gusto yung ginagawa ng laborers. Ang magiging problem sa ganyan kasi is, kapag may nangyaring masama, pwede sabihin ng contractor na, oh, that's not our work anymore. The CM did that. Okay? I mean, if it were up to us, we would have done it correctly, but since nakialam siya and may authority siya over us, we let him. But that's his work na. Nag-fail na all of his, siya yung nagpagawa. Okay? So, if you notice, parang nadadamay na siya sa liability. Okay? So, hindi dapat gano'n. Dapat maingat si CM not to overstep the boundaries. Dapat malinaw na trabaho pa rin ng contractor yung ginagawa ng contractor, and therefore, pananagutan niya yun kasi gawa pa rin niya yun. Okay? So, yeah, yun yung una. Not be involved that directly. No? Dapat let the contractor still do it. Ang trabaho lang ng CM is to ensure na tama yung ginagawa ng contractor. Kung mali, sabihin mo sa contractor, mali. That's all. Okay? Huwag ikaw yung gagawa kayo magpapagawa ng pamparitin. Diba? Kasi pwede na sabihin ng contractor na ikaw na yung nagpagawa. Also, the CM should not impose methods, systems, or designs that will substantially affect the construction schedule and impair the design concept of the architect. Again, this is just about not overstepping his boundaries. Dapat matters that need to be referred to the consultants must be referred to the consultant. Okay. Legal responsibility of the CM, the architect. na naging CM, no, again, we're assuming the architect in CM, is responsible to the owner on all aspects of the construction work, programming, coordination, quality, cost control, time management. The CM should not assume any liability kapag nag-collapse yung building due to the following. Okay? Nag-collapse yung building due to deficiencies in the design, provided na hindi siya kasali sa plan review or sa design review and approval. Or nag-collapse yung building due to construction, provided na ginawa naman niya yung trabaho niya during construction. So, kasi merong ini-imply, no, na liability dito. Para kasi sinasabi rin niya, kapag nag-collapse yung building due to the design, and kasali siya sa plan review, then ang question now is, so ibig sabihin ba, dapat damay siya? Same for construction. Kunyari, nag-collapse due to construction, tapos may mga pagkukulang pa na siya sa trabaho niya, damay ba siya? Ang implication dito is, medyo yes. Kaya basta, ang sinasabi dito is, wala siyang liability kung hindi naman siya kasali sa design review, kung ginawa naman niya yung trabaho niya during construction. Okay, so kung hindi niya ginawa, or kung kasali siya sa design review, ang kabaliktaran, it appears is, yes, dapat meron siyang civil liability. Okay? So, yun. Well, honestly, kung ito aabot sa korte, kung ako ang mag-decision sa ganyan, I base it on what the civil code is saying. Article 1723. Okay? But that's just my opinion. Let's just follow what this is saying. Again, my suggestion, no matter how you feel about how they interpret certain things, kung ano yung nakalagay dito, should be the way that you answer questions in the exam. Kasi these are our standards. Okay? Qualifications. Sino ba ang pwedeng maging CM? No? What kind of architect are we looking for? The construction manager could be an individual person or it could be a firm. Okay? Kung firm or kung individual, dapat professional. It should be a state-regulated professional. Preferably an architect. Of course, our standards will say that. The industry probably does not say that, but our standards say we prefer an architect, not engineers. An architect with managerial capabilities and extensive experience in construction. Okay, in particular, especially qualified daw yung mga arkitekto na contractor or yung mga arkitekto na naging responsible na for construction. Yun yung mga arkitekto na magandang choice for construction management. Okay, let's talk about this now. SPP 205, Post-Construction Services. So, where are we now in the story? So, tapos na yung design clearly. Tapos na rin yung construction. The building is now working. Nasa post-construction na tayo. Pag sinabing post-construction, construction's done. The building is now operational. What service could an architect still render for a client with an operational building? Okay, do we still have anything to offer the client? Yes, we do. Okay, short answer, building management or building administration. Okay, now, building administration and management goes beyond maintenance and upkeep. It requires the services of a multidisciplinary professional. Spoiler alert, architecto yan. Pag nakakita kayo ng a multidisciplinary professional, you know where that's headed. Well, that's going to be the architect later on. But anyway, building administration requires a multidisciplinary professional who can perform a wide range of functions, a wide range of functions for the efficient and economical operation and maintenance of a building. And again, no surprise here, this person who can perform this wide range of functions is the architect, right? The architect may be hired as the building administrator, property manager, maraming permutations in term yan, building manager, property manager, building administrator, but it's essentially the same thing. Someone who manages the operations of the building. Okay, so typically we would hire building administrators for commercial, industrial, residential, or institutional buildings, facilities, or complex. The goal of having a manager is you want the building to be properly maintained to maximize the lifespan of the building, and also you want someone there to ensure na parang, well, to maximize profits in a way. Kasi kapag sobrang mahal yung expenses, talo yung profits eh. Diba? Nakakain ng expenses yung profits. At the same time, sometimes meron tayong business their growth, we'll see that later. Na ang goal naman is to attract tenants, to sell condo units, part pa rin yan ng post-construction service. I'll just get to it. Ano pa yung kasama sa post-construction services? So, we have two clusters. Now, we have the building administration cluster, and then we have the post-construction evaluation cluster. I'll start with the first cluster. Under building administration and facilities administration. Now, there are four services here. Building maintenance, grounds and landscaping supervision, building equipment maintenance, and business development and management. So, isa-isahin natin. When we say building maintenance, hindi ibig sabihin ikaw yung magiging taga-maintain. Like literally, ikaw yung mag-aayos ng mga elevator, etc. Ikaw yung mag-repair ng mga sirang aircon. No. Your job is to ensure that everything is being maintained in good condition. As manager, obviously, hindi ikaw yung mag-maintain. You're just there to ensure that the suppliers come back for preventive maintenance. Okay, you're just making sure that somebody's checking and somebody's repairing and everything works perfectly. Okay, as building manager, it's also your job to formulate the rules for the building. Like in a condo, for example, ikaw ang magde-decide hanggang anong oras pwede gamitin yung pool, hanggang anong oras po pwede yung gym, pwede ba ang visitors, mga ganyan, hanggang anong oras pwede mag-park sa guest parking. Yung mga ganyan bagay, that's your job. Okay. Next, as building manager, as part of building maintenance, you monitor security services, you monitor the maintenance and upkeep services, yung mga kinahire yung cleaners, dapat nagilinis talaga, yung mga nagko-collect ng basura, kino-collect lagi, yung mga ganun bagay. That's part of building maintenance. Under grounds and landscaping supervision naman, you're going to be supervising landscape contractors, gardeners, yung mga taga-dinig, maintenance of the landscaping, making sure that the entrances and exits and parking areas are orderly, making sure yung mga daanan and ramps are all maintained properly. Under building equipment maintenance, ito rin yun, very similar to kanina in general building maintenance, but this time, specific to equipment. Ano ba yung mga parts ng building na talagang dapat mini-maintain ng maayos? Yung mga mahal na equipment, elevators, escalators, aircons, genset, transformer, yung mga ganyan, they are maintained, they must be always in good working condition, and kapag may nasira, dapat repair agad. No, there's nothing more annoying than a non-working elevator or escalator. Okay, so for example, MRT stations, laging sira ang, well, I don't know now, pero madalas dati sira ang escalator, sira ang elevator. May nakita ko before, naka-wheelchair, binuhat from EDSA to the train station sa Santolan. Santolan ba yun? Basta one of the higher stations from EDSA. Okay? Which is, obviously because walang working elevator, and sasakay ng MRT yung naka-wheelchair. So, but kung sino man yung in charge of maintaining the MRT, I mean, this is not news. Everyone knows this. Pero the MRT is a very poorly maintained property of the government. Diba? So, yeah. Anyway, in buildings, this is your job. Okay? And finally, under this cluster also, pasok yung business development. Okay? Business development is a bit different. This is definitely a post-construction thing. Kasi this is only applicable to operational buildings. Pero this is not about maintaining the building, making sure the building is clean and working. This is about making sure that the building is earning money. Okay, so two examples nito, two common examples is buildings for lease and buildings for sale. Unahin natin yung for lease. Yung mall or office building, we want the spaces to be fully leased out. In the mall, ayaw natin yung walang tenant yung mga store. Di ba? You know that there's no tenant kapag naka-board up yan, tapos merong tarp, tapos may magandang graphics yan, tapos nakalagay, something exciting is coming. Kapag may nakalagay na something exciting is coming, there's a good chance that nothing is coming. Kasi it would be there if it was coming. Okay, yung mga ganyan, generic yung mga yan, something exciting is coming, ganyan, or minsan yung iba honest, nakalagay, for leasing inquiries, please call, ganyan. So yun at least aminado, na walang tenant, and naghahanap sila ng tenant. Pero ang point is, we don't want to see that in the malls or in the office buildings. Gusto natin, lahat ng spaces may tenant, may nagre-rent, para kumikita yung building. Trabaho yan ng business dev. Okay? Similarly, sa condo, business dev, or it can go by many names. Sometimes in other developers, iba yung term nila. Pero there's someone in charge of this. Like, for example, sa amin, medyo leasing actually, may leasing department talaga eh. Pero sometimes business dev lang yung gumagawa. Another example is the sales din. Someone has to be responsible for selling the condo units. Like by the end of the year, dapat 90% sold na yung building, mga ganyan-ganyan. Someone has to do that. And there's usually a person who comes up with schemes to attain maximum building occupancy or to maximize sales. A business dev person. No, parang, what can we do para pandemic, ang dami nag-pull out na tenants at all, what can we do to attract new tenants? Okay? Ang hina ng sales ng condo na to kasi hindi maganda yung location. So what can we do para ganahan yung market, bumili sila ng condo? So someone has to come up with these ideas. That's usually the business dev person. So that's the job here, no? Coming up with innovative schemes to attain maximum building occupancy or to maximize sales. Pasokin dito yung building the tenants for rentals, utilities, etc., etc. Okay, the other cluster is not about building management, but post-construction evaluation. This is when you're hired not to manage the building, but to study a building that's been completed and just to find an answer for the owner. Because the owner could have questions. Like for example, merong initial design program, ano yung versus the actual use, minsan hindi yan pareho. Like during planning, during design, they envision that this atrium will be ganyan. Pupuntahan ng tao for this, magiging venue for this. Actual, nangyari ba talaga? Is it really an attractive location within the project? Or talaga bang mataas yung rents in that part of the mall because maganda yung design? So, that's an evaluation. Na-evaluate ano yung initial design program and totoo bang na-achieve yun sa totoong buhay. Now, that's part of post-construction evaluation. Another thing, determining the effectiveness of various building systems. Kunyari, during design, kinonvince ka ng consultant to buy a very expensive type of air conditioning system. Yung sinasabi sa'yo, mahal yan sa umpisa, pero in 5 years, pagawin mo na yan. Okay, kasi matipid, sobrang tipid ng kuryente mo, kahit napamahal ka sa upfront investment, ang mababawi mo yan sa operational costs, ganyan. So, ideally, mayroon nagmo-monitor nun. Okay, somebody has to check, ganun ba talaga effective? Are you really saving that much per year to offset the cost of the initial investment? So, that's part of post-construction evaluation. Okay? Kasi rin sa post-construction evaluation, yung assisting proper third parties to evaluate the effectiveness of the design, the effectiveness of the construction process. Kunyari, you decided if you prefab yung buong building, well, at least yung mga architectural components, mga ganyan. So was it really effective? Did you really save enough money? Did you really do it that much faster? Okay? Was it really as good as conventional? Yung mga ganyan. And also, pasok din dito yung parang forensic investigation, very similar to forensic architecture in SPP 203. Pwede kang utusan to include in your study yung mga defects and failures like shrinkage, water seepage, cracking, lahat ng mga defects na yan that could begin to appear when the building is already operational. So that's part of post-construction evaluation. Manner of providing services as usual. Pwede kang architect of record tapos ikaw pa yung mag-render ng ganitong service or pwede naman consulting architect ka lang for this service. Again, medyo unusual yung architect of record ka na tapos ikaw pa yung consultant for this. Parang architect of record ka, so you design the building and then pumayag kang maging building manager, okay, like permanent position, parang kayo mag-manage yung building. It's a very unusual concept, I think, but again, no one's going to stop you. People are going to find it strange, but if you really want to, then yeah, it's technically allowed. Okay, SPP 206 talks about the comprehensive architectural service. The comprehensive architectural services. Okay, so konting rational again, kalagay. This idea, yung idea of comprehensive services, evolved through the years in response to emerging complex projects. Some projects are so complex. And recently raw, nagkaroon ng transition in the profession. No? Dati ang mindset daw natin was, there's a basic design service, and then there are add-ons or additional services. Ito yung mga specialized architectural service like acoustic design, etc., etc. Even yung mga pre-design service, you can see them as add-ons. Eh. Diba? I kept mentioning that parang add-ons yan because some clients will need it, some clients won't need it. So those who need it, get them as add-ons. That was the mindset before. Na parang kukuha ka ng someone to do the basic service and you get people to do the add-ons for you. But recently, there's a new mindset now emerging, and the mindset is a more comprehensive manner of rendering all of these services. Meaning, getting all of these services from the same person. Getting one person to do all of these things. Why would you want one person doing all of these things? Continuity is the answer. Okay, it's a good idea to have one person do everything, because continuity. Okay, if the same person performs the, say, the feasibility study, which is a pre-design service, and then siya rin yung magagawa ng site utilization study, another pre-design service, and then siya rin yung kinuha mong regular design architect, regular design service, siya na rin yung acoustic, sa construction siya na rin yung CM, tapos siya na rin yung building manager. Continuity-wise, it's a nice thing kasi he understands, now that person understands the building through and through kasi nandun siya from the very beginning, he was present for the entire parang story. So he knows the background. Walang na-miss out. So honestly, maganda yun. No? The advantage of that is, I think, obvious to everyone why that's a good thing. So that's the idea behind the service. In this service, you award all of the professional services we've studied. So pre-design, regular design, specialized architectural, construction services like full-time supervision and construction management, and post-construction services to one person. Again, for continuity purposes, kasi that comes with its own advantages. Now, if you're thinking, parang ang ano naman, parang ang dami na, parang ang galing naman ng person na yun, na parang kaya niyang gumawa ng feasibility study, kaya niyang maging architect of record, regular design, tapos magaling pa siya sa acoustics, tapos siya pa yung CM, tapos magaling, alam din niya kung paano mag-manage ng building. You're not going to be expected to literally perform every service. I'll explain that later. Okay, I'll explain that in a bit. But anyway, if you render this service, you are still the prime professional. You function as the creator, author, and coordinator of building design. And you have to be very knowledgeable in other fields, not just building design, not just regular design. Okay? Ito yung sinasabi ko. The architect is not expected naman to perform all of the services himself. No. Instead, what he's expected to do is he's expected to act as the agent of the client, standing by the client side, procuring and coordinating all of those services for the client para hindi na si client yung gagawa. Kasi medyo stressful din yung gagawin niya yan for the client kasi client yung maghahanap ng gagawa ng kasi maghahanap siya ng acoustic designer, regular designer, tapos kukuha pa siya ng bukod sa contractor, kailangan pa niya ng CM, kailangan pa niya ng building manager, ganyan. So, it can be a good idea to just ask one person, can you take care of all of this for me? Okay, just get me the best, find me the best deals, negotiate with them, and then I'll just pay you, just tell me how much and I'll pay you. Some clients would like to have that one person taking care of everything for them. What we're saying is architects can be that person. No? And if that person is an architect, then that architect would be rendering comprehensive architectural design services. Again, not necessarily because siya yung gumagawa literally ng mga service, but he's the one either rendering or procuring those services. Okay. So scope, again, the scope is 201 to 205. Pre-design kasama sa scope, regular design kasama sa scope, the 23 specialized services kasama, the 2 construction services kasama, full-time supervision and CM, and the post-construction services kasama, building administration and post-construction evaluation. Okay. Now, dito ako mapasok guys in term na project management. Okay, project management. Kapag ginawa ka to render comprehensive architectural services, you actually perform the duties of a project manager. Tawag na natin is project management. Either of the two terms would work. Mas personally, I prioritize yung term na comprehensive architectural services because that's parang the name of the module. But the point is, you are a project manager when you are doing this. Now, that's the essential difference between a PM and a CM. Ang scope ng CM, obviously, construction manager is the construction phase down, whereas the PM is involved and oversees all phases from pre-design services kung meron kinuha to the regular design service, specialized services kung meron, and then construction service and post-construction services. So the entire parang the 5 groupings of services, the PM manages or oversees all of those 5. Kaya mas broad yung scope ng project management. Okay. Project management involves management activities over and above normal architectural services. The overall objective is to have control over time, cost, and quality. Okay. Pero just because there's a PM doesn't mean that the designers are relieved of their duties. Kanya-kanya pa rin yan kung sino yung kinuha consultant for the pre-design service, for the regular design service. Kanya-kanyang liability yan. No? The PM just complements them, doesn't replace them. The PM does not parang become liable for their liability. Kanya-kanyang liability pa rin sila. The PM is just there to complement their functions and to help parang to manage the entire project as a whole. Okay. So the project manager could be an individual, it could be a firm. It's usually a firm in real life. Pero there's usually one person within the firm that's called the PM, or the project manager. The project manager operates as a member of an owner, architect, engineer, contractor team. In the team approach, may kanya-kanyang role daw yung team members. So ito yung roles ng bawat isa. Of course, the consultants do the design. Hinihuli pa yung engineers, pero it's the same thing. Itong dalawa, consultants yan, design, yung trabaho nila. Of course, the contractor is the one constructing the building. Of course, the owner is the one paying for everything and deciding on everything. Ang primary job ng PM, apart from managing the project, is for the owner, ang pinaka-importante niyang trabaho is overall cost control. I didn't say this is in the SPP. No, parang ang dami niyang trabaho, pero if you have to single one out as the most important duty, it's probably cost, kasi sinabi ng SPP. Exercise of overall cost control. The PM will plan, program, and monitor the various activities and will act as an advisor of the client and of the contractors and consultants on material costs and construction methods. Okay, scope of service. Let's start with before the construction. Kailan ba dapat i-hire yung PM? PM pala. Kailan dapat i-hire yung PM? Ang sabi ng standards natin, ideally, during the design development phase, meron ka ng PM. Kung ikaw yung client meron ka na ng PM para masulit mo kasi ang idea nga ng PM is nandun siya from start to end. Okay? So, the earlier the better, in other words. Kasi if you hire this person later, then parang sayang din. Hindi rin niya na-witness the entire duration. So, ideally, during the design development phase, nag-hire na kayo ng PM. Kung pwede nga raw, earlier pa, kung pwede kasabay ng architect, i-hire yung PM. Para, as in, literally from the start of the design, may PM ka na. Okay? Sometimes the PM could also function as the CM, like yung wala na separate CM, in-absorb na ng PM yung CM duties, in which case, the PM will also render the services enumerated in 204A and 204B. That's a common setup as well. Okay, so SPP 207, the standards for design build services. I'll recap what the Code of Ethics said. Ang sabi ng Code of Ethics, there's nothing unethical, there's nothing inherently unethical about the idea of design build services. Okay? Konting rational, why do we perform this service? Sabi ng SPP, in any building project, there's a need to balance time, quality, and cost. Now, dapat balance yung time, quality, and cost. And in many cases now, this balance can best be achieved if the architect performs both the design job and the build job, the construction and the design. Okay? Usually, mas na-achieve nga yung quicker, better quality, and cheaper. Okay? Are we even qualified to do this? Are we even qualified to take a direct role in the construction? The answer is yes. Again, if they ask you, is the architect qualified? Probably yes. Kasi usually yes, you should go there. An architect with his education, training, and expertise qualifies him or is qualified to take a direct role in the project, not just in the design or conceptualization, but also in the implementation or meaning construction. Hindi lang tayo qualified dun sa concept or sa design, pati sa construction daw, we're qualified to take a direct role, meaning tayo yung magpo-construct. Okay? A design build arrangement is a good arrangement because it simplifies and expedites the process of project delivery and it's cost effective. It's usually cheaper for the owner kapag design build yung offering. Okay? In design build services, the architect assumes the professional responsibility and civil liability for both the design and the construction of the project. This is obvious, this is common sense. Wala ka nang kawala sa civil liability kapag design build. Kasi, iba sa civil code, ano lang naman yan eh. Kung hindi designer, contractor daw. Wala ka nang kawala because now you're both the designer and the contractor. Kapag ka ang problema is design, it's your fault. Pag ang problema is construction, it's your fault. So in other words, pag nag-collapse yung building, we're pretty sure it's your fault. Okay? It has to be your fault unless you can prove na parang act of God or force majeure yun. Pero assuming na walang ganung argument, it's definitely your fault. Wala ka na ibang pwedeng tisiyan. So ano yung scope ng design build service? Well, you have to discuss the service in these terms. There's two kinds, there's two arrangements in design build. Meron tayong tinatawag na design build services by administration. Meron design build services with a guaranteed maximum project construction cost. I'll start with the basic option, yung design build services by administration. So in this service, so design build by administration, you do the design part. Kasi design build is. So of course, the design, you still do it. Meaning, lahat ng dapat mong gawin under SPP 202, which is the one explaining regular design services, gagawin mo pa rin. So, sabi natin, different phases yun, may project definition, schematic design, design development, contract document phase, and construction phase. Lahat yan, trabaho mo pa rin yan as a designer. Now, you might notice, there are only 5 phases here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you recall sa SPP 202, there were 6 phases. So one phase is missing. One phase is missing. May nawalang phase. Okay. I don't know if you noticed it right away. We don't have time for you. I can't wait for your answer. But the correct answer is the missing phase is the bidding phase. So SPP 202, yung number 5 is bidding. Okay? Wala nang bidding dito kasi the purpose of bidding is to find a contractor. And in design build, you don't need a contractor because you are the contractor. So that's why wala nang yung bidding phase. Wala nang yung bidding phase. Construction phase again. So you do all of that because you're still the designer after all. But the construction phase is not the same. Okay, may construction phase pa rin obviously, pero hindi siya kapareho ng construction phase sa SPP 202. If you recall, sa SPP 202, anong sabi natin? Ang trabaho ng architecture during the construction phase, periodic site visits, preparing change orders, evaluating the billings, ganyan-ganyan. Pagpa-punch list kapag kamitan, kapag kanadaanan na mali, sabihin mo na mali. Ganun lang trabaho mo before. But that was when you were just a designer. Okay, now you are the designer and the builder at the same time. Contractor ka na, parang gano'n. I don't want to say that pero that's the easiest way to say it. Parang ikaw na rin yung contractor So, ibang level na yung trabaho mo sa construction phase. Ano na yung trabaho mo? You go beyond periodic inspection, you're now going to do the following. First, ikaw ang gagawa ng schedule of work, program of work, estimate ng materials, labor, transport, equipment, services. Lahat yan, normally, contractor ang gagawa, ikaw ang gagawa niyan. Ikaw ang mag-organize and mag-hire ng construction personnel, workers. Ikaw ang magbibigay ng trabaho, magpapasweldo. Okay? Ikaw ang mga ng subcon, piecework contractors, mga subcon. Ikaw ang mag-evaluate ng accomplishment nila. Ikaw ang magpapabayad sa kanila. It's your job now to procure materials, lahat ng kailangan ng materials, plans, equipment, licenses, permits. That's your job now. Ikaw ang mamamahala ng lahat ng accounts, pagbabayad ng billings, lahat ng mga supplier nyo, lahat ng mga subcon and workers. Okay, of course, ikaw ang mag-keep ng records, detailed record keeping to books of accounts for the project. Ikaw ang kakausap sa gobyerno and other private agencies that need to be approach, yung mga kailangan lapitan, kailangan kausapin for the project. And generally, all other business transactions for the project, ikaw na ang, nasa iyo na, ikaw na ang gagawa niyan lahat as contractor. Again, medyo awkward sabihin ng contractor. I'll show you later why. Pero the point is, normally, this would be the duty of the contractor. This is now your job. Okay, so anong difference nung we now move to the second arrangement. So yung kanina was the design build services by administration. We now go to the option 2, design build with guaranteed maximum project construction cost. It's exactly the same as before. Yung sinabi natin kanina. The only difference here is you guarantee your estimates. You guarantee a maximum project construction cost. You tell the client, allow me to do design build. I assure you, hindi ka lalagpas ng 10 million for your house. First of all, is that allowed? Is that ethical? Normally, you're not allowed to guarantee your estimates like that, but there are times when you're allowed to. And one of those times is design build. No? In design build, the law and our standards of practice allow you to guarantee the estimates. Okay, so anyway, bottom line, this arrangement is exactly the same as design build by administration. The only difference is you do all of that plus you guarantee the maximum project construction cost. Okay, how does this work in pag-guarantee? You give the client an estimate and you commit not to exceed the estimated cost. Kung nagkataon na hindi mo pa nga na-maximize yung cost, kanyari, ginarantee mo na 10 million, tas 9 million lang yung nagastos, yung savings na 1 million, by default, ang nakalagay sa atin, i-divide daw equally between the client and the architect. Pagkakatiyan, kliyente, and the architect yung savings. Okay, when we say guaranteed yung maximum cost, as in literally ba, bawal magpas kahit piso? Di naman. Kaya ang sabi sa standards natin, when we guarantee the cost, what we're essentially guaranteeing is the construction cost will not exceed 10% of the estimate. So pwede naman lumagpas, wag lang sobra, maliit lang, not more than 10%. Meaning, if you guarantee that the project cost will not exceed 10 million, pag yung actual cost is 10.5, okay pa yun. May allowance kang 10% eh. 10% of 10 is 1 million. May pataan ka ng 1 million. Lumagpas ka ng kalahating million, okay pa yun. Lumagpas ka ng 700K, okay pa yun. Lumagpas ka ng 1 million, okay pa yun. Pasok ka pa sa 10% allowance. Pero pag pumalo ka ng say 12 million, hindi ginarantee mo ng 10, pero umabot ng 12. Now we have a problem. Okay, kasi lagpas ka na sa 10% allowance. 10% allowance, pwede hanggang 11 eh. Pero na umabot ka na ng 12, that's a problem. Ano mangyayari dun sa 1 million? Penalty mo yun. Ikaw magbabayad mo. Okay? Paano kung umabot ng 15? Penalty mo yung 4? The default rule is penalty mo siya, pero FYI, may limit yung penalty mo. The limit is your administration fee. Kaya ano yung administration fee? This requires me to explain something. Balikan natin yung design and services by administration. Okay? The reason why I kept hesitating using the word contractor to describe you, no? Nag-render ka ng design build. I hesitate calling you contractor kasi hindi kapareho ng usual contractor setup yung setup mo sa design build. An important difference is this. Sa design build, hindi ka raw dapat gumagastos ng sarili mong pera. Hindi ka dapat naglalabas ng pera. Kinukuha mo yung pera ng kliyente, tapos ginagastos mo yung pera niya for the project. What do I mean? Ano? Is that important? Yes, it's important kasi most contractors, sila yung gagastos initially eh. Tapos kung ano yung matapos nila, i-build nila. May progress billings. Kunyari, kung ano yung nabuhusan na column today, yun ang i-build. Okay? So, in the meantime, habang hindi pa nabibuild, si contractor yung nagbili ng semento, bumili ng bakal, nagpasweldo ng tao. So, parang ginastosan niya yung columns na yun, di ba? Tapos, since tapos na, i-build niya sa client. So, babayaran naman ng kliyente. Pero ganun kapag typical contractor yung setup eh. Pero sa design build, architect yung kinuha mo, design builder. The architect is not supposed to spend his own money. No, yun yung default setup. Wala dapat pera, pero dapat yung kliyente. So you take your client's money, bibigyan ka niya ng parang revolving fund. Of course, dapat detailed yung accounts mo, dapat nakalog lahat ng gastos, diba, expenses. Pero supposedly, you're taking the client's money and you're spending it to buy cement, buy materials, pay for workers, pay for everything para mapatayo yung building. Why are we making this distinction now? Okay. Kasi, dun sa isang setup, yung sa contractor setup, so, bibili siya ng semento, bakal, papasweldohin yung tao, ipapatayin niya yung building, kasi singilin niya si client. Right? Normally, yung singil niya kay client, may patong yun for profit. Hindi yung direct cost ng materials and labor, may patong yan. Okay? May patong yan. Doon yung kinukuha yung profit niya. Okay? Pero sa setup ng design build, na pera ng kliyente yung ginamit mo, paano ka magkakaroon ng profit? Ano yung ibubulsa mo yung ibang pera? Para meron kang fee? Kanya? No. What you're going to get here is a professional fee. We call it the administration fee. Kasi, design and services by administrator, parang ang role mo dito is not really contractor, pero parang administrator ka of the construction. Nagkapamahala ng lahat. No? And for all of your trouble, what you're going to get is a professional fee. Like how much? Sige, I'll tell you now. Basahin niyo yung compensation guidelines. Pero 7%. No, 7% dapat yung makuha mo for this. 7% of what? Of the PCC. Lagi namang PCC. 7%, like, paano yun? Eh, may design fee ka pa. Iba pa yun. May design fee ka pa, singil ka for design. And then for the build part, diba? Design, build. May fee ka for design, may fee ka for build. Itong design, may percentage ka dyan. Okay? Sabihin natin 6%. Depending on the building type yan, depending sa groupings. Diba may groupings? Sabihin natin 6% ang fee mo dito for design. For build, meron kang 7% na fee. Okay? We call this fee your administration fee. Bakit tumingin yung fee? Kasi again, ikaw yung administrator. No? So of course, dapat may bayad naman. Kasi wala kang pinapatungan eh. Hindi ka naman makakasingil. Wala kang billing si contractor. Wala kang pwedeng kay client. Wala kang pwedeng pagpatungan ng profit eh. Babayaran ka niya ng professional fee. Okay? Why are we talking about this? Balikan natin yung ginaranting mo yung estimate. Okay? Sabi natin, meron 10% na allowance. Pagka lumagpas ka, but within the 10% allowance, no problem. But anything beyond the allowance, penalty mo na yun. Pag lumagpas ka ng 100K, penalty mo yan. Lumagpas ng kalating million, penalty mo yan. 1 million, penalty mo yan. Pero may limit ba? Never ending yun. Pag lumagpas ng 10M, penalty mo yun. Not necessarily because ang limit ng penalty mo is your administration fee. Okay? So yung fee mo for the build part, kung ilang percent man yan, I'm telling you now, 7% yan dun sa design build by administration. Dito sa design build with guaranteed maximum cost, 10% ang fee mo. Mas mataas kasi medyo may risk sa iyo eh. Review na lang yung fees, di ba usapan kasi. Pero ang bottom line is, yung administration fee mo, magkano man yun naman yung limit ng penalty. In other words, pwede kang tatawa ng penalty, pwedeng mag-zero yung administration fee, pero hindi naman pwedeng mag-negative. No, hindi pwedeng pati yung design fee mo kinain na kasi nag-zero na dito, so dito na pupunta yung penalty. No, the limit of the penalty is your administration fee. So that's an important concept. So those are the two options in design build. Okay, paano kung nagmahal yung construction cost? Namagpas-lagpas ka kayo ng 10M yung guarantee mo. Namagpas kayo ng 12M. Pero hindi mo naman kasalanan. It's because si owner nagpadagdag ng kung ano-ano pala. Or nagtaas ang dole ng minimum wage. Or nagtaas ang cost ng bakal because of the pandemic. Mga ganyan ba? Kumbaga, hindi ka nagkamali ng estimate. It's just yung mga nangyari beyond your control. Hindi mo naman talaga kasalanan. Do you get charged the penalty? The answer is no. Kaya hindi yan dapat i-charge sa'yo. Hindi ka dapat ma-penalize for these things kasi these are not attributable to your fault. No? Ang concept ng penalty is kung nagkamali ka talaga ng estimate. Wala namang nakikita minsan, di naman nagtaas yung labor cost. Di naman nagtaas yung material cost. Wala naman any reason, wala naman siya pinapadagdag. Ba't hindi tayo natapos sa 10M? Ba't tayo umabot ng 12M? Obviously, dapat sabihin naman yung penalty kasi ginarantin mo yan eh. Okay? Kung takot kang mag-guarantee, if you're thinking, bakit ako mag-guarantee, sir? Sa totoo lang, parang nakakatakot tong option na to. Kung meron naman palang option na I won't guarantee the cost, why would I choose this? Again, kasi mas mataas yung administration fee mo in this option. 10% versus 7. No, that's the incentive. That's the reason why you may want to do this. Okay, but anyway, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, just stick to the parang default, yung administration without guaranteeing the estimate. Okay, manner of providing services. Okay, this is a common question. Pag sinabing design build ka, ibig mo sabihin, sir, contractor ka talaga. Like, dapat contractor ka, no? Kasi kung hindi ka contractor, paano mo gagawin yung design build? That is an obvious option. Yes, that's an obvious scenario. No? The architect is also a contractor, a state licensed contractor, so therefore qualified to do design build. That's an obvious scenario. Pero pwede rin mag-design build yung mga architect na hindi contractor. In other words, ang gagawin lang nila, maghahanap sila ng contractor, pero siya yung mangongontrata ng contractor. In other words, hindi nakakontrata yung contractor na yun sa kliyente. Ang may kontrata ay si architect and the client. Tapos, as far as the client is concerned, the architect is responsible for design and build. Pero sa side naman ni architect, meron talaga siyang kinuhang taga-build. Pero again, walang contractual relationship yung contractor and the client. Kay architect nagre-report yung contractor. That's also a valid option. It's a valid option. Okay, so either of the two is valid. Okay, how about yung sir, yung mga objection ng mga traditionalist kanina, yung sinasabi natin, ang objection sa design build is, baka raw hindi mo na gawin yung pagpupulis, no? Baka hindi mo na i-punch list, baka hindi mo na sabihin na mali yung gawa kasi ikaw na yung contractor eh. No? Imagine natin scenario is, kunyari, pangit yung gawa ng pader, very wavy. Okay, normally you would punch this time, sasabihin mo kay contractor, ayan, no, hindi maganda yung quality ng pader. No? Dapat i-plaster nyo to uli or something para maging makinis kasi ang pangit pag tinamaan ng ilaw, ang wavy. You would ask the contractor to repair that thing. Pero ngayon, ikaw na rin yung contractor. Okay? And you're seeing mali yung gawa ng tao mo. Papaulit mo ba or not? Kasi, ang worry natin, what if, hindi mo na ipaulit, sabihin mo na lang, acceptable yan. Kasi, the architect is the judge of acceptability. Si architect ang magsasabi ko, acceptable or not. So, pag tinanong ka ni client, architect, parang ang ano ng wall, bakit ganyan? Parang medyo may nakikita akong texture, parang may wave akong nakikita. Hindi ba mali yan? Parang dapat yata ipaulit niya sa tao niya. What if ang sabihin ng architect is, no, client, this is the intent. Okay, this is what we're going for. Na parang, I deliberately asked them to do this. I wanted the wall to be wavy because we're going for parang this mood, this vibe, this is the energy we're going for. No, we want a wavy wall. You could easily do that eh. Kasi again, you're the sole judge. You tell the client, this is acceptable, this is the goal, this is what we wanted. That's what we fear sa design build. That's where the objection comes from. So, is design build unethical or what? Ang sabi ng standards, design build is fine. There's nothing unethical about design build because gagawin mo yung trabaho mo as designer. Okay? You will retain your separate professional identity as an architect. Separate yung identity mo for design and build. Meaning, yes, ipapump this mo yung pader. Yes, ipapaulit mo yan. Yes, even if it means you will have to incur the losses, no? Kasi gastos mo yan eh. Kayo nagkamali, kayo magtatama niya. Hindi mo yan pwedeng i-claim ng additional multi-client kasi kayo nagkamali. Pero ang presumption here is, itatama mo yun because as architect, it's your duty to correct that, to punch this down, to tell the contractor, which in this case is you, to correct it. Okay, so that's the assumption here. And hopefully that's what you do. No? Na magiging strict ka pa rin sa quality, even though ikaw na rin talaga yung contractor. So the expectation is you retain your professional identity as architect, you follow the code of ethics, you follow SPP Document 202, you do all of the duties enumerated there, including yung pag-condemn ng bad work. Okay? Ito is just kind of the same thing. Follow the architect's credo, kung may conflict of interest, be honest, etc. This is our standards for architectural design competition. Sometimes we refer to it as the competition code. So let's begin. Ano ba yung standards natin? Okay, so the purpose of this SPP is to state the standards for architectural design competitions. This is designed to protect not just the owners, but also the competitors as well. First, we have to define a few terms pagdating sa architectural design competitions. So we have to define owner. The owner is kung sino yung nagpa-contest. The owner is the person or the organization na nagpapa-contest. Ang objective ng owner is to get a good design from the contest. Okay? Siya yung nag-i-invite, siya yung nagpapa-contest, siya yung nagpa-fund, nagbibigay ng pera for the competition. So that's the owner. Jury are the people appointed by the owner to judge the entries, to assess the entries to the competition. The members of the jury are called jurors. It consists of a majority of architects assisted by a lay juror. We'll talk about the jury later. I won't read down the rest. But the point is, the jurors are the ones who judge or assess the entries. Professional advisor is an architect that organizes the competition on behalf of the owner. Yung owner cannot organize the competition on his own. Dapat meron siyang organizer, and that organizer, according to our standards, must be an architect. Okay? We'll talk about this later, yung nominated by the owner, approved by the UAP. Pero the point is, this guy, this person, is the one organizing the competition, and he or she must be an architect, and we call him or her the professional advisor. Now, technical advisors are optional advisors na pwedeng i-hire para pwedeng i-consult ng jurors during judging. No? Normally, you would need technical advisors kapag may highly technical aspects yung contest or yung design. Like, kunyari, part of the contest is designing highly efficient solar energy systems. Okay? So sometimes you have to have, I don't know, technical advisors na experts in solar energy to help the jury score, to help the jury analyze the entries. So optional advisors yan is needed. Secretariat, the competition secretariat is the body formed by the owner, a group of people basically who assists the professional advisor in organizing the competition. Parang admin staff, taga-sagot ng telepono, taga-email, taga-send ng invitation, taga-receive ng mga entry, taga-tawag, mga ganyan ba? Okay, so yun yung mga staff basically, competition secretary. Conditions, it's a document that includes the program, the instructions, on submissions of entries, site plans, entry forms, official envelopes, and labels. Ito yung binibigay sa mga sumali. Dito na lang papasahin nila yan to understand ano ba yung contest, ano ba yung kailangan gawin, kailan ba ang deadline, ano ba ang format, etc. And the conditions must be prepared by the professional advisor. The IAPOA ABC Committee, basically the design competition committee within the IAPOA or the UAP. This is a committee that oversees architectural design competitions in the country. Okay, next. Okay, now let's talk about the different classifications of architectural design competitions. Now, there are many ways to classify design competitions. The most obvious is this. I think pinaka-common way. We can classify competitions based on whether or not the winning design will be implemented. No? Tanungin mo, parang trying to figure out, yung mananalong design, itatayo ba or hindi? Okay, based on the answer, there are two kinds of competitions. Competitions where the design, the winning design will be built. Ang tawag natin dyan is project competitions. Project, kasi magkakaroon ng actual project, yung mananalo. Okay? Yung competitions na hindi ipapatayo naman yung winning design, tawag din ideas competitions na. Where the point is just to get the best idea and to win a prize. Okay, pero hindi siya ipapatayo, walang magiging project yung winning designer. Okay, so there are two types of competitions: project ADCs or project competitions and ideas competitions. But there are other ways to classify competitions. Another way is to look at how many stages the competition has. In those terms, there are two kinds. Merong single stage competition, merong two-stage competition. Okay. Next, you could also classify competitions based on who can join. Sino bang pwedeng sumali? Based on that, there are two types. May open competition. Pag sinabing open, may qualifications. If you qualify, then you can join. Okay? Pero meron din competition na limited by invitation, meaning it's not open. Kung sino lang ang maimbita, sila lang ang pwedeng sumali. Limited by invitation. Another way to classify, although no one does this, but you could also classify competitions based on degree of complexity, as discussed in SPP 202, yung Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, mga ganyan. You could classify competitions in that way, but honestly, I don't think anyone does that really. Kaya ang pinaka-importante is the first three. Okay, now let's begin with the requirements now for design competitions. The most basic is this. IAPOA approval is required. Bago i-announce, bago kayo mag-announce, kung ikaw yung the owner, no, ikaw yung nagpapa-contest. Kaya gusto mo patayo ng you're a big corporation, ano ba? Kunyari na lang, you're a local government, magpapatayo kayo ng bagong terminal or bagong monument or whatever in your city. And so nagpa-contest kayo. Bago nyo i-announce na may pa-contest kayo, dapat ma-approve muna ng IAPOA or the UAP now na dapat ma-approve muna ng IAPOA yung competition. Kami kayo dito, before any official announcement is made by the owner, a written approval from the IAPOA of the conditions, the schedule, the ADs, the competition registration fee, the membership of the jury must have been received in writing by the owner through the ABC committee. Without this approval, without the approval from the IAPOA, you cannot announce your contest yet. Okay? IAPOA approval is required. Next, after it's approved, so pag in-approve na ng UAP yung contest, then you can make the announcement. The announcement is called the Notice of a National Architectural Design Competition. It's issued by the owner with a request for publication in technical journals. The announcement should say kung saan makukuha yung conditions, paano sumali, may babayaran ba, etc. Dapat nakalagay din sa announcement na IFO approve or UAP approve yung competition. Now let's talk about the conditions. Again, the conditions are ito yung dokumento na ibibigay sa competitors, babasahin nila to know what they need to do to win, right? Okay, so important condition, not necessarily yung papel, pero important general condition in any competition is anonymity. Now, nakalagay sa standards natin, it's essential that the anonymity of competitors be maintained until the final judgment, meaning all competitors must remain anonymous and the jurors must never know who designed which. Okay? Dapat anonymous yan. Okay? Second general condition, basic condition ito, the conditions, like meaning yung papel, yung mga instructions na binibigay sa competitor should be identical for everyone, obviously. Hindi pwedeng merong extra instructions na makukuha yung ibang sumali. Okay, the conditions should state the following clearly. Ano sa competition, ano yung problem na pinapasolve sa mga sumali, and ano yung requirements na kailangan nilang sundin, that they need to comply with. Okay? Next, the conditions should also clearly distinguish between mandatory requirements and requirements that permit the freedom of interpretation. Meron kasi mandatory requirements, like pag sinabing A1 size, that sounds mandatory, right? Like parang A1 size, there's no other way to interpret that. It's A1 or A2 size. Pero yung may mga requirements that permit the freedom of interpretation, like at a readable scale, mga ganyan. So that kind of, it's not exactly mandatory. Like your readability, it can be different for each person. So anyway, the point is, kung mandatory, dapat malinaw na mandatory. Para alam na kailangan sundin talaga strictly. Okay? All entries must be submitted in the manner prescribed in the conditions. Dapat sumunod sa format, sumunod sa deadline, sumunod sa number of boards or number of sheets, whatever. Next, the information in the conditions must be specific and must not be open to misinterpretation, obviously. Kapag mayroong second station competition, okay lang if there is supplementary information and instructions given to those competitors who proceed to the second stage. That's expected. Next, the conditions must state the number, the nature, the scale, the dimensions of the documents, plans, or models required in the terms of acceptance. Kailan ang deadline, ilang boards, kailan ang meron bang ibang email, meron bang mga ganun ba? Dapat malinaw yung lahat. And ito important, very specific. Kung pagsasubmitin daw sila ng cost estimate, dapat may standard format. I agree with this. Kasi sometimes, pag hiningan mo ng estimate, some people would give you a very tamad estimate na parang per square meter lang. Some people would go as far as parang medyo naka-breakdown. Some people very detailed, no? So, hindi equal yung effort. So, para pantay-pantay, dapat may standard format. Let's talk about the advisor. So far, what we have said is the advisor is the one organizing it, the competition, and he or she must be an architect. Okay? The advisor must be appointed and paid for by the owner, pero the owner cannot just choose anyone. Dapat approved by the IFOA or the UAP. Now, again, there's an ADC committee, there's a competition committee within the UAP, so dapat mag-approve ng gustong advisor ni owner. The main role of the advisor is the supervision of the competition and the preparation of the conditions. Siya yung gagawa ng conditions and siya yung mag-supervise ng competition. Okay, part of his job includes the following: making sure na nasusunod yung schedule, making sure na nare-receive yung mga tanong daw, questions of the competitors, making sure na sasagot yung tanong, making sure na na-receive yung entries, making sure that all competitors remain anonymous. That's part of the job of the advisor. It's also the advisor's job to assist the jury and to attend the deliberations, but he must not participate in the deliberations and he must not vote because he is not a juror. Again, the advisor is not a juror. His role is limited to organizing the competition. And let's now talk about the jury, the jurors. Okay, so first, sabi natin kanina, but we'll say it again. Dapat, before ma-announce yung competition, dapat meron ng names ng jury. Okay, meron tayong jurors. Dapat nakalagay sa conditions yung names. No? Kung sino ba yung mag-judge ng contest, dapat nakalagay. Kasi ang idea dito is, the people who want to join must know kung sino ba yung jury para they know who's going to be judging them. Okay? Kasi some people, pag nakita yung name ng jury, the jurors are known to be people who prefer this kind of design. And you know that the way that you design is not something that they like. huwag ka na nasumali, maybe. Baka hindi mo na gusto yung sumali. Kasi, you think hindi ka mananalo because the jury is that person and that person and that person. Right? So, dapat nakalagay yung pangalan. Okay? The jurors are appointed by the owner, but again, as always, dapat i-approve muna ng IAPOA. And the IAPOA will assist the owner in selecting the jurors. How many jurors should there be? The jury must be composed of the smallest reasonable number of persons, as few as possible, but always should be outnumbered and should not be more than 7. Again, as few as possible, the fewer the better, but always an odd number and not more than 7. If you look at the requirements, you're left with 3 numbers. No? Pwedeng 3, pwedeng 5, pwedeng 7. Okay? Hindi pwedeng even number. And hindi pwedeng 1 kasi it's jury in the plural. So, I guess plural na yun dapat. Dapat more than 1. So, 3, 5, or 7 lang. Do they all need to be architects? No, but a majority of them must be architects. And also, to ensure na everything is legal, walang anything unusual happening, at least one of the jurors must represent the UAP or the IAPOA. Okay, one architect must come from the UAP. Can the owner have a representative? Yes, but not more than 1. Okay. Other requirements, it's essential that all of the jurors are present during all meetings, and also each juror must see the conditions before the conditions are given to the competitors. More requirements for the jury. The jury must vote on each design submitted. Okay? Hindi pwedeng, kunyari, the competition received 70 entries, but only 30 entries are presented to the jury kasi parang pre-selected na raw ni owner. Pinili na lang ni owner yung best 30. Bawal yun. The jury must see all submissions. Okay? The list of ADC awards, including the jury's report to the owner, must be signed by all jurors before they are dissolved. 1 copy of the jury's report must be given to the UAP or the IAPOA. Another important requirement, kapag 2-stage yung competition, sabi ng requirements natin, both stages should be judged by the same jury. Hindi pa din nagpapalit ng jury during the second stage. Bawal daw yun. Okay? Next, speaking of stages, kapag yung competition na-prove as a single stage competition, bawal sila gumawa ng second stage. Bawal magkaroon ng second stage. Kasi approve sila as a single stage. Kung talagang gusto ng second stage, dapat magpa-approve ulit sa UAP na magkakaroon ng second stage. Okay? I'll explain later why. Pero dapat may UAP approval yan. Okay. Next, any drawing, photograph, model, or other documents na hindi naman required must be excluded bago i-judge ng jury yung entry. Okay, dapat tanggalin. Kanya hindi naman required ng scale model. May nagsabit ng scale model. Dapat tanggalin yung scale model bago makita ng jury yung entry. Okay, kasi unfair yun sa ibang sumunod sa format, sumunod sa requirements. Parang, ang mangyayari, if you're thinking, gawa naman nila yung scale model, bakit unfair yun? Kung gusto nilang mag-extra mile effort, ba't hindi hayaan? Hindi pwede kasi kawawa yung iba. Pag nalaman ng ibang sumali, sumunod lang sila sa rules, sabihin nila, ito pwede pala, kung alam namin na pwede pala gumawa ng scale model, we would have submitted the scale model as well. Parang, so it's unfair. It's unfair kapag may extra things na hindi naman required. It's not a level playing field. Next, the jury must disqualify designs that do not conform to the mandatory requirements. Okay, that's obvious. Tanggalin yung mga hindi sumunod sa format. The jury must make awards, meaning somebody has to win. No? Hindi pwede ang findings ng jury is, nakalagay sa report, we regret to inform the public that nobody won this competition. Okay, because we received no good entry. Okay, hindi pwede yun. Somebody has to win. If you think, paano nga yun, sir, paano kung pangit lahat ng entries? No? Wala talagang maganda nakuha ang entry. That's the risk that you take in a competition. No? Someone's going to win. No matter what entries you get, somebody will win. And somebody has to win. Nakalagay, the jury must make awards. The awards must be final and made public by a certain date. May deadline dapat dyan. Nakalagay dapat dyan sa conditions. The jury must also award the full prize amount, obviously. Hindi pwedeng may bawas. And as for their fees, kung meron ng sweldo yan or allowances, travel allowance, subsistence, meals, sabi dyan dapat ni owner. So about ineligibility, mga bawal sumali sa contest. Obviously, no member of the jury can join, either directly or indirectly. That's obvious. Now, we don't need to explain why. Bakit ka sasali kung juror ka? Diba? Parang tama naman yun. Pero itong second part, medyo importante to. No juror can be commissioned with work connected with the prize-winning design, either directly or indirectly. What are we talking about here? Imagine na merong project competition, meaning the winning design will be built. Okay? Um, May nanalo, tapos ikaw, sumali ka, pero talo ka. Tapos tinapay niya yung building. Nalaman mo later on na yung supplier ng Hero was one of the jurors in the contest. Okay? That could lead to questions eh. Okay, some people would begin to wonder, siguro kaya siguro nanalo yung designer na yun, siguro pinakakuha niya yung juror, baka nag-usap sila, may under the table deal siguro yan, siguro sinabi niya, pag nanalo ako, entry number 14, I'll make sure ikaw ang kukuhanin namin supplier ng Yero. Parang pinangakuan, kumbaga. So, that's the reason why may ganito tayong prohibition. No juror can be commissioned with any work connected with the prize-winning design kasi it does not look good. Okay? Also, it's not just the jurors. Any part of the organizing body, the promoting body, any associate, any employee concerned with the organization of the contest can compete, bawal sila sumali, and bawal sila mag-assist sa mga competitor. Let's talk about prices. The standards do not state how much dapat yung premyo. Okay? Ang nakalagay doon, dapat malinaw sa conditions from the start magkano yung premyo, ilan yung premyo, and whatever the amount is, it must be related to the size of the project. Kasi, to be fair, especially for ideas competitions daw, wala namang ibang makukuha ang premyo yung tao kundi yung pera na yan. So, sana naman yung premyo is parang adequate to compensate them for their efforts. Okay? Kasi kung project competition, medyo okay pa siguro. Okay? Kasi bukod sa money, meron pa siya makukuha ang project. Eh. Pero kung ideas competition, premyo lang talaga yan. So, it's important na you compensate them enough. Wala silang sinabing guidelines kung magkano. Basta just enough para naman ma-reasonably compensate sila for their hard work. Okay, this goes without saying, but we're going to say it. The owner must accept the decisions of the jury. The owner must pay the prices allocated within 1 month of the announcement of the results. Okay? In addition, kapag yung contest is limited by invitation, each participant must receive an honorarium in addition to the prizes. Lahat ng kasali, automatically may honorarium sila. Think of this as parang consolation prize. Ang lahat ng sumali, pag limited by invitation, may honorarium automatically. Walang uuwing luhaan. Same pag two-stage competition. Lahat ng aabot ng second stage dapat automatically may honorarium or again, common term for this is consolation prize. Walang uuwing luhaan kapag umabot ng second stage. Okay? This is the reason why kanina sabi natin, kung approve kayo as a single stage competition, bawal kayo magkaroon ng second stage. Dapat magpa-approve kayo ulit kasi this is one of the things that the UAP will check. I-check muna nila bago kayo kaya mag-second stage. Babayaran niyo pa, may consolation prize ba kayo naka-ready? Kasi kapag second stage, required na sa standards, dapat merong honorarium. So dapat i-commit muna, sabihin muna nila na may honorarium bago i-allow ng UAP na magkaroon ng second stage. Next, the conditions must state kung ano gagawin sa winning design. That's obvious. Ipapatayo or not. Bawal gamitin yung mga design na sinasubmit without agreement with the author. Ito yung worry natin sometimes about competitions kasi ang worry natin, naka-receive si owner ng 70 entries. Paano kapag bukod sa winning designs, ginamit pa niya yung ibang entries? Diba? Parang tiba-tiba siya sa design options eh. Diba? Tiba-tiba, ang dami niyang options. Parang nananakaw yung design. Parang yun yung worry lagi eh. So anyway, nakalagay sa standard natin, bawal gamitin yung ibang design except by agreement with the author. Hindi pwedeng gawin daw ito ni owner yung mag-pick out siya ng portions of the entries to compose another design. Kunyari, gusto niya yung plan ng entry number 4, pero gusto niya yung facade ng entry number 17, tapos gusto rin niya yung landscaping layout and parking layout naman ng entry number 34. Hindi pwede yun. Okay? Again, just pick one design. Kung sino nanalo, yun yung gagamitin. Or kung may gusto kong ibang gamitin, kailangan, kausapin mo yung owner nun, mag-usap kayo, bayaran mo siya. Okay? Hindi pwede yung ninanakaw mo yung ideas from different entries. Next, in project competitions, the award of the first prize places the owner under an obligation to entrust the author with the commission of the project. Obligado si owner na kuhanin niyang arkitekto, yung designer of the first prize. No? Project competition, meaning the winning design will be built. The winning design will be built, and the architect of record of the project will be the author of the winning design. What do you mean, sir? Parang obvious naman yun. Ba't kailangan kong sabihin yun? Paano kasi kung, sinyari si owner, happy siya dun sa winning design, pero talagang hindi niya feel yung designer. Like, ayaw niya dun sa person. No? Like, ayaw niya makipagtrabaho sa person. Gusto lang niya yung design, pero ayaw niya yung designer. Gusto niya kumuha ng ibang designer. Hindi allowed yun. Okay, kailangan kuhanin niya as architect of record yung designer. You cannot separate the designer from the design. Ito naman, paano yung ganitang scenario? The winning competitor is unable to satisfy the jury of his ability to carry out the design work. Kunyari, it's a big project and you are a newly licensed architect and you beat the big firms and you won. Okay, like maganda talaga yung design mo, you won the competition. However, you are inexperienced. This would be your first project and this is a massive project. Okay, and the jury is medyo unsure. Nagulat sila, hindi ko expect na bata lang yung gumawa ng entry na yun, freshly licensed lang. Baka hindi niya kaya yung architect of record duties, ang dami niya dapat i-inspect, ganyan, parang hindi siya ready. The jury may require the winning designer to collaborate with another architect of his own choice. Bahala na mamili yung winning designer kung sino yung gusto niya. Ang idea is parang to mentor the winning architect. No? Nagkakaroon siya ng mentor. This mentor, I'm just calling it a mentor, pero hindi ginamit yung term na mentor, must be approved by the jury and the owner. Just in case hindi tayo sure kung kaya ba niyang gawin or not. Next, paano kung ganito? The winning design, hindi talaga gusto ni owner. So, ayaw niya ipatayo. Nung nakalagay sa kontrata, ipapatayo dapat, pero ayaw niya ipatayo. Okay lang. Walang pilitan, pero unfair din sa winning designer kasi napangakuhan siya na magkaka-project siya, pero lumalabas, hindi siya magkaka-project. So parang kumbaga, parang hindi niya nakuha yung full price package. Okay? Ano nakalagay sa standards? Kapag lumipas daw isang taon, 12 months, and wala pa rin kontratang nasasaynan, the owner is required to further compensate the winning designer by a sum equal to the amount of the first price. In other words, doublehin niya yung premyo. Kunyari, the price was 50,000 pesos plus magiging architect of record ka. So, nakuha niya na yung 50K, pero hindi nag-materialize yung project. If 1 year na lumipas, walang project na lumabas, dapat bigyan ulit ng 50K yung winning designer. That's what this is saying. Okay? However, so that's true, that's correct. However, kapag dinoble yung premyo, that doesn't mean na pwede nang kunin ni owner yung design without the architect. Kunyari, ganito yung scenario. Ikaw yung nanalo, ako yung owner. I'm supposed to build your design. Gusto ko naman yung design mo, pero hindi kita gusto as a person. Like, parang, hindi lang talaga tayo, our personalities are parang, we just don't like each other. Or I just don't like you. I don't like you and I don't want you to be my architect. So I asked everyone, can I just build this design without this architect? And sabi sila, no, you have to hire him. You have to hire him. Eh, ayaw mga kita i-hire. So lumipas ang isang taon, hindi ka na-award ng kontrata. What should I do? I should double your price money. And I did that. Now that I've doubled your price money, can I now take the design and build it without you? Can I now tell you na, give me the design, look at the premium mo, please go away, let me build the design now without you? No, I still cannot do that. Nakalagay kasi the owner does not acquire the right to carry out the project except with the collaboration of the owner. Again, inseparable yung designer at yung design. That's the basic concept there. Okay? Now, in an ideas competition, what if tuwang-tuwa si owner? Hindi naman dapat ipatayo, pero ang ganda talaga ng idea. So the owner decided to implement the project. Pwede ba yun? No problem. Basta, kuhanin yung architect of record yung author, and dapat acceptable yung terms. Mag-usap sila in other words. Ito, side question. Pwede bang kunyari ako yung owner, and ikaw yung nanalo. Okay? And I don't really like your design. I don't understand why you won. But I have to accept the decision of the jury, right? I have to accept that decision na ikaw yung winner. So, binigyan kita ng premyo. Ang gusto ko talaga is yung second place, hindi ikaw. Pero second place siya eh. Okay? Ikaw yung first place. So, binayaran kita ng premyo mo, may premyo siya, ganyan-ganyan. Pwede ba instead of implementing your project, I implement the second place? It's just a theoretical question. I'm just reading between the lines of all the rules. Okay? So to answer that question, we have to figure out what's going to happen. So if we're going to do this, ako yung owner, tapos nilapitan ko si second placer, sabi ko, second placer, I like your design, I want to build it. Can I do this? If I do this, it means I won't be building your design because first placer, and I won't be building your design. If I don't build your design, what am I supposed to do? What should you get in return? Ang sabi dito, doblehin ko yung premyo mo. So, I'll do that. Doblehin ko yung premyo mo para wala kang reklamo. And now I go to the second placer. Okay, second placer, I'm going to build your design. Pumayag naman siya. Nagkasundo kami. Can I do that? In other words, pwede bang magreklamo si first placer? Sasabihin niya, oy, bakit nyo, anong ginagawa niyo? Parang you're cheating on me. You're supposed to build my design. I won the contest. Why are you talking to this second placer? Based on the rules, honestly, I don't think that you have the right to complain kasi ang nakalagay lang naman sa rule, kapag hindi nag-materialize yung project within 1 year, dapat doblehin ko na yung price mo. Okay, dinoble ko naman, so wala ka na dapat reason to complain. Hindi ko naman inaagaw yung design mo, wala namang nawawala sa'yo. I compensated you correctly according to the rules. There's nothing in the rules saying na I cannot go to the second placer. In fact, if anything, ang nakalagay sa rules is this. Basta there's something here kanina, I don't know. Ito, general sentence lang din. The designs generated in the competition cannot be used in any way except by agreement by the author or with the author. So, assuming na may agreement naman kami, nagkasundo naman kami, then I can use the other designs. But again, kind of reading between the lines here. But yeah, based on the rules, I think that's okay. Walang karapatan si first placer to complain kasi na-double naman yung price money niya. And wala namang mali na ginagamit kayong second placer kasi babayaran ka naman siya, nagkasundo naman kami. Okay, so, I'm just saying, mukhang pwede. Let's talk about copyright now. The author of the design has copyright over the work, bawal i-alter, bawal copyhin, bawal gamitin without consent. Again, the design awarded first prize can only be used kung talagang i-hire din yung designer as architect of record. Bawal gamitin yung ibang designs except by agreement with the author concerned. Again, for the agreement, and therefore pwede. As a general rule, the owner's right to use the design covers one execution only, unless sinabi sa conditions na multiple executions. And again, as always, the author of the design has copyright over the design by virtue of Section 33 of RA 9266. Registration, let's make this quick kasi hindi naman ganun ka-critical yung concepts here. All competitors must register. Pag nag-register ka, ibig sabihin, tinatanggap mo yung conditions. Okay? Pag nag-register ka, you get all of the documentations. Now, sometimes they may require you to pay a deposit. Okay, this is okay. Pwede naman yan. Yung magbabayad ka ng 500 peso deposit, refundable when you submit your entry. Ang purpose kasi ng deposit is to discourage yung mga nuisance competitor, yung mga nagsasign up, hindi naman pala sasali, hindi naman seryoso. So, kapag di ka sumali, then you forfeit your deposit. You lose the money. Pero, kung sasali ka naman, dapat ma-refund sa iyo. Nakalagay, the deposit must be returned. Kapag nag-submit ng design, yung sumali. Insurance is required. All entries must be insured just in case anything happens. Masira man yan, bahain, masunog. May insurance na makukuha dapat. May pwedeng makapag-claim sa insurance dapat yung competitors. Exhibition and entry. Lahat ng design, kahit na disqualified pa yan, basta lahat ng sinabit must be exhibited to the public for free for at least 2 weeks. Kasama sa exhibit yung jury's report. Again, 2 weeks, open to the public, free of charge. This is for transparency purposes. The owner must notify all competitors about the exhibit, kailan, saan, and also the owner must send every competitor a copy of the jury's report. The owner must also inform about the IAPOA na exhibit, and the owner must send photos of the winning designs to the IAPOA just in case the UAP wants to publish. Return of the projects. Okay, ito medyo intense yung word and destroyed. Some people get surprised. All drawings, all plans other than the winning designs must be destroyed at the end of the public exhibit unless provisions are made to the contrary in the conditions for the competition. This is the default rule. After the exhibit, all of the other designs must be destroyed. Ang purpose nito is para hindi sila mapakinabangan ng mga mapagsamantalang tao. Parang we'd rather destroy the designs rather than manakaw pa yung ideas. Okay? Pero if you're thinking, parang ang intense naman ng destroy. Bakit destroy agad? Hindi ba pwedeng ibalik mo na? Pwede naman, kalagay naman, unless there are provisions to the contrary. Like, pwede naman lagay yung conditions. 2 weeks yung exhibit. After the exhibit, you can claim your drawings for a month at our office. If you don't claim after within that month, then we will burn we will shred the drawings. Basta ang point is dapat hindi siya ma-retain indefinitely by anyone. Kasi that could end up in the wrong hands, baka magamit pa yung design. We don't want that. Okay, we don't want that. However, kapag may pinasubmit na models, dapat i-ship daw ng owner back to the designers, no, yung models, at the expense of the owner. Ito standard lang, ADR clause. Dapat may ADR clause with conditions, meaning kapag nagkaroon ng disputes, you go through an alternative dispute resolution method, usually arbitration. I won't go through the details. Well, yeah, wala namang details. Nakalagay lang, the expenses for arbitration must be shared by the two disputing parties. Okay, so that's the end of this module.